Prince Odbo quickly dismissed his own speculation, feeling that the likelihood of their involvement was also low. After all, they are the world's largest energy importer. Destroying energy pipelines would affect their energy imports, so they shouldn't be that foolish. It could be said that they are perhaps the least likely to be involved. The group fell into confusion, completely lost. They didn't know where to look for clues or how to respond to this crisis. The senior officials from one nation expressed their regret. Previously, energy sales were quite good, and we thought we were entering a peak sales season, but we didn't expect it to turn out like this. Our country was relying on these oil sales for salaries. Now, we will have to band together to weather the storm. Until all the oil wells are repaired, we will have to endure some tough times. The higher-ups from another nation were puzzled by these comments. Wait, what peak sales season? We weren't aware of that. Prince Odbo was taken aback. You didn't know? Just recently, we also sold a significant amount of oil. It's no exaggeration to say that our quarterly sales nearly matched our total sales for the entire previous year. Another nation chimed in. We also sold quite a bit of oil, earning nearly 100 billion. The officials from the puzzled nation responded. We are all part of the Desert Oil Alliance. Why didn't we see any fluctuations in our sales? That shouldn't be the case. Everyone felt surprised. Prince Odbo suddenly suggested, could it be that the quality of your oil is poor, which is why no one is buying? The officials from that country shot him a glance. Your oil is the one that's subpar. Our oil is renowned for its quality. If ours is considered poor, then there wouldn't be any good quality oil in the entire world. At that moment, the officials from another nation suddenly stood up, stating, recently, we also made quite a profit. The officials from the previous nation were taken aback, and then they heard the response. This answer nearly left them speechless. This nation, which has experienced years of conflict and has crumbling infrastructure, not only seized the opportunity during this oil boom. Moreover, the sales in a single quarter surpassed the annual sales of the Kray region. This left the high-ranking officials of Kray utterly unable to maintain their composure. Why are our oil wells the most damaged, yet we haven't even seen a hint of the peak oil season? Is this a deliberate targeting of us? The officials from Kray exclaimed angrily. Just as their fury reached a boiling point, a subordinate suddenly reported, Your Highness, the ambassador from the Eastern nation has arrived. Chapter 188. The mechas are not selling. Let's buy some. As the high-ranking officials of the Desert Alliance were engulfed in anger and confusion, the arrival of Ambassador Zhao Yi from the Eastern nation was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples. Zhao Yi was an elegantly dressed middle-aged man. With graying hair at his temples and a slight smile that revealed shallow dimples, he exuded a refined and amiable charm. However, in international relations, envoys are merely swords in the hands of their country's policies, and one must never judge a person by appearances. The other party might very well smile while plotting your demise. Everyone's gaze was fixed on this envoy from the Eastern nation, filled with surprise and suspicion. The atmosphere in the conference room of the Desert Alliance was tense and oppressive. The unexpected appearance of Ambassador Zhao Yi made them both wary and curious. Speculations ran rampant about the purpose of Zhao Yi's visit. Could it be that they were here to negotiate a price reduction due to our increase in oil prices? Impossible. If prices were to drop, we would suffer losses. We cannot lower the prices. If the Eastern nation is here to discuss a price reduction, we absolutely cannot agree. Yes, we will not agree. The high-ranking officials silently resolved in their hearts that they would not easily compromise when it came to national interests. Ambassador Zhao Yi walked steadily into the conference room, his face radiating calm and confidence. Prince Odbo looked at Zhao Yi and inquired, Esteemed ambassador, your sudden visit caught us off guard. Should we find a private room to talk? Zhao Yi smiled and waved his hand, surveying the crowd to indicate that it wasn't necessary. It seems I arrived at just the right time. I see everyone is here, which saves me some trouble. Upon hearing his words, the attendees exchanged glances, further convinced that the Eastern nation seemed indeed to be here to discuss a price reduction. A hint of coldness appeared on their faces. Although they had achieved significant victories with the mechas purchased from the Eastern nation in their struggles against Daishing, when faced with substantial national interests, they could only prioritize those interests. However, Zhao Yi's next words completely stunned them. He slowly stated, I'm here today to show you something. I think you might be very interested in this, as it concerns the damage to your oil wells. At his words, everyone abruptly turned their heads. Their attention once again focused on Zhao Yi. The ambassador, who always wore a gentle smile, now had an even brighter expression on his face. It seemed he had guessed their concern regarding what he had just said. Indeed, Prince Odbo immediately asked Zhao Yi, Ambassador Zhao, do you know something we should be aware of? Zhao Yi nodded slightly and said, the situation in your country has already impacted global energy stability and has caused considerable unrest domestically. Our country has a decent relationship with yours, so we mobilized some resources in an attempt to alleviate this energy crisis. However, instead of easing the crisis, we discovered some alarming information. As he spoke, Zhao Yi placed some documents on the table for their review. Without a second thought, the high-ranking officials picked up the documents, their eyes scanning them casually. Initially, they wore expressions of confusion, but just seconds later, that confusion solidified into furious breaths and clenched fists. It turned out that the root cause of this crisis was linked to a certain country. The realization struck them hard. The high-ranking officials from the Kray side reacted the strongest, their eyes turning red in an instant. No wonder we missed that peak oil sales season. No wonder our oil wells were the most destroyed. It was this enemy country. The anger in the hearts of the Kray officials burned like a raging fire. Zhao Yi, However, calmly stated, we didn't say it was that country. We're just showing you what we discovered, with absolutely no intention of inciting conflict. As fellow victims, we believe you have the right to be informed. Prince Odibio nodded coldly. Rest assured, Ambassador Zhao, we understand your point. Thank you for the intelligence you provided. It is very important to us. He looked around at the others, and the high-ranking officials from the desert nation were all visibly furious. They were enraged by the actions of that country. It said that cutting off someone's financial lifeline is akin to killing their parents, and this time, that country had completely offended all of them. Prince Odibio gradually clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging as he angrily declared, we cannot let this go unpunished. We must seek revenge. Do they really think we are their lackeys? We are not afraid of them. The expressions of the other high-ranking officials grew increasingly serious. Although they were angry, they were also acutely aware that they did not possess the capability to retaliate against that country. The military strength of that nation was indeed the most powerful. Moreover, they were always aggressive. When they decided to act, they could mobilize troops immediately. Unlike others who valued peace, they were quick and decisive. The high-ranking officials from the Pyramid Nation anxiously inquired, how should we seek revenge? Are we supposed to compete with them militarily? We can defeat their forces, but we are no match for that country. Prince Odibio replied with determination. What are we afraid of? We have mechs. He brought forth their second most powerful strategic weapon, second only to nuclear arms. Initially, 10 mechs could completely destroy a squadron of their aircraft, and 20 mechs could thoroughly intimidate them. The combat effectiveness of the individual combat mechs was unquestionable, which was also their source of confidence. However, the other countries still had some concerns. Even the high-ranking officials of the organization with deep-seated grievances against a certain country expressed their concerns, but our number of mechs is still too small. It's not enough in front of them. Moreover, even if we can defeat them, don't forget, they have nuclear weapons. What if we provoke them and they decide to use them? Everyone fell into silence. Only one official, unafraid, said, what is there to fear? Do they have the monopoly on nuclear weapons? We have them too. Some oil-producing nations do possess nuclear weapons. However, the launch authority is in the hands of another nation. Unless they initiate an attack with nuclear weapons, we won't retaliate with them. An official from another nation quickly interjected, but they have thousands of nuclear warheads, while you only have 10. And if nuclear weapons are actually used, the world would be thrown into chaos. At this moment, Ambassador Zhao Yi spoke up. His expression extremely serious. Your country can consider other means of revenge, but nuclear weapons must not be used lightly. Otherwise, we will not stand by. Zhao Yi was representing his country's stance, which had been communicated to him beforehand. The conflicts must not be escalated to an uncontrollable level, such as the use of nuclear weapons. However, this left the high-ranking officials from the oil-rich nations in a quandary. They all clenched their fists, filled with helplessness and anger. Should they just endure? Their mechs were too few to confront the other side directly, but they also didn't want to remain passive. Someone suggested, how about we play dirty with them, like using planes to crash into buildings? The unyielding official immediately rejected the idea. No way. You must understand. We are the victims, and our actions are a just retaliation. We cannot be seen as terrorists. Once again, everyone fell silent, unsure of what to do next. So, what do you propose? Asked the other high-ranking officials, at a loss for ideas. The unyielding official was also out of options. At this moment, Ambassador Zhao Yi spoke again. He took out a document from his briefcase. Actually, I have another purpose for coming here. I would like to ask for your assistance. The high-ranking officials from the other nations looked surprised. They were currently stuck in a quagmire. How could they help? The unyielding official had a good impression of the other nation and asked without hesitation, what do you need help with? We will definitely assist. Zhao Yi pushed the document in front of them. Our domestic mechs are not selling well. Please help us by purchasing some. Mechs not selling well. Are you joking? Such powerful machines could possibly not sell? When Ambassador Zhao Yi mentioned the unsold mechs and hoped the oil-rich nations would buy some, the representatives were all taken aback. They could hardly believe their ears. How could such formidable humanoid weapons possibly not be selling? It should be noted that the other nation had previously sold individual combat mechs publicly for a time, which had shocked the world with their immense power. However, soon after, the Dragon Kingdom stopped selling, which made the desert nations feel regretful for having purchased too few at the beginning. Now, the Dragon Kingdom has actually contacted them again, wanting to sell mechs to them, which is simply a stroke of luck. Prince Odibio's eyes widened in disbelief as he immediately asked, is this true? We are actually prepared to buy some mechs to strengthen our national defense. Nowadays, individual combat mechs have become second only to nuclear weapons in their minds. Moreover, they are not restricted by any treaties. They can use them however they want. It is truly a powerful tool for national defense. Previously, they had completely subdued their opponents with the individual combat mechs they purchased. If they could acquire more, they might even be able to confront their powerful rivals. Prince Odibio's words were filled with excitement and anticipation, as he seemed to envision the scene of the Desert Alliance nations rising on the world stage with these mechs. Not only the oil-producing nation where Prince Odibio resides, but other countries also felt an uncontrollable excitement upon hearing the ambassador's words. The senior officials of these nations whispered to each other, their eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. They understood the formidable power of individual combat mechs, which can change the dynamics of warfare. With these mechs, they would have the capital to contend with powerful enemies and the confidence to defend their own nations. Prince ODBU said without hesitation, prepare 5 more for us. No, prepare 10 individual combat mechs. We want to buy 10. Upon hearing this, Ambassador Zhao Yi was taken aback. One individual combat mech is worth 30 billion. 10 mechs would amount to 300 billion. Wow, are these mechs really that in demand? It should be noted that they were previously worried that the desert nations would hesitate due to the high prices. So they planned to give them a discount of 50 billion for each mech. Although 50 billion is a lot, it is still extremely profitable for the mechs that cost hundreds of thousands each. The main goal is to promote the implementation of their strategic plan. It wouldn't be a loss at all. Just as he was about to inform them about the discount, he was interrupted by Prince ODBU. Ambassador, what do you want to say? Are you having second thoughts? Or are you reluctant to sell to us? A hint of vigilance appeared in Prince ODBU's eyes. Ambassador Zhao Yi quickly waved his hand to indicate, that's not it. It's just. His words were interrupted again as Prince ODBU responded, since that's not the case. There's no need for further discussion. Ambassador Zhao Yi thought to himself, well, since you are not interested in the discount, then there is nothing we can do. However, he was worried whether other countries would think the price was too high. Yet, Ambassador Zhao Yi was overthinking it. The senior officials of the Pyramid Kingdom expressed some dissatisfaction towards Prince ODBU, saying, Your Highness, we know you have money. But purchasing 10 mechs at once means you've bought them all. What will we buy? If I remember correctly, you previously purchased 10 mechs. Now you are buying another 10. Can't you leave some for us? Prince ODBU also realized that they might have bought a bit too much. Now, they had 20 individual combat mechas in their country. It should be noted that they had previously subdued a regional power in the Middle East with just 20 individual combat mechas. Their strength was evident. The most important thing was that if the other side only had a few, and a large portion was bought by them, what would others do? Who among them didn't know the power of individual combat mechas? Who didn't want to buy more? Ambassador Zhao sensed their thoughts and hurriedly said, It's okay. We produce plenty of mechas domestically, and we can meet any demand you have. Can you really meet any demand? The crowd was taken aback by this statement. Was the production capacity that substantial? Just how many powerful mechas did they have in stock? Ambassador Zhao continued, furthermore, if you are dealing with a formidable opponent, a few mechas may not be enough. Their military strength is quite terrifying. While individual combat mechas are impressive, they may still fall short when facing such an opponent. It's safe to say, the more individual combat mechas, the better. Ambassador Zhao's words prompted nods of agreement from the desert nations. The higher-ups from Clay said, We are well aware of the strength of such opponents. If your country can truly meet our needs, then prepare 5 for us. The nation of Pyramid quickly added, We also want 5. The country of Baidi boldly declared, We want 10. In the end, the desert nations directly purchased a total of 40 individual combat mechas from the other country. This transaction brought in a staggering profit of 12 trillion. The key point was that it was cash, understandable payment. Together with the mechas purchased earlier, the Desert Alliance now possessed a total of 60 individual combat mechas. Early the next morning, the 40 individual combat mechas were delivered. When all the mechas stood proudly in the inspection area, the scene was quite spectacular. In the inspection area of the Desert Alliance, dozens of individual combat mechas stood tall, resembling steel giants. The sunlight gleamed on their shiny metal exteriors, reflecting dazzling light. They were imposing and majestic, exuding a sense of advanced technological quality. Each mecha seemed to harbor immense power, radiating a chilling aura of intimidation. The mechas had smooth yet robust lines, well equipped with various advanced weapon systems subtly visible. They stood silently, yet one could feel an indescribable sense of pressure, as if declaring the inviolable dignity of the Desert Alliance to the world. Imagining their presence on the battlefield, these steel bodies were like moving war machines, capable of easily tearing through enemy defenses. It should be noted that a single mecha could eliminate an entire squadron of 5th-generation aircraft, and here there were a full 60. An imposing sight that made the onlookers' blood surge with excitement. Prince ODBU exclaimed excitedly, It's time for us to strike back. His eyes burned with the flames of revenge, as if he could see the coalition of desert nations launching a counterattack against a certain power with the assistance of mechs. Meanwhile, in a distant region, the head of the finance department, Qian Jin, was fretting over an unexpected energy crisis in his country. He hadn't had a good night's sleep in days. Although higher authorities claimed that the country could weather the crisis, it was impossible to do so without spending money to stabilize the domestic situation. Over 200 billion had already been spent, and it seemed that this amount might not be enough. At that moment, an anxious subordinate knocked on the door, looking flustered and holding a document. Qian Jin furrowed his brow at his subordinate's frantic demeanor. What's the matter? What happened? The subordinate, out of breath, explained the situation. Director, our account suddenly shows an additional 12 trillion in local currency. What? Qian Jin was taken aback. An extra 12 trillion? How could that be possible? Even someone like Qian Jin, who was not particularly sensitive about money, was shocked by this influx. He immediately checked the relevant documents and found that it was all true. He wanted to confirm who had transferred the money, but the sender's account was classified, and he had no authority to know. Just then, a phone call came in, and it was Ambassador Zhao Yi. Qian Jin was puzzled about why the ambassador was calling him. To his surprise, the ambassador inquired if the funds had arrived. Funds? What funds? Qian Jin was momentarily stunned, but he quickly reacted and eagerly asked, Mr. Zhao, did you arrange for this 12 trillion? Ambassador Zhao smiled calmly. You flatter me. It was the higher-ups who instructed me to sell mechs to the desert nations, and they ended up purchasing 40 units this time, earning 12 trillion. Qianjin was dumbfounded. Wow, are mechs this profitable? At that moment, he suddenly remembered that the individual combat mechs were the brainchild of Su Chen. Soon, Su Chen's image flashed in his mind. And thinking of the current crisis, he couldn't help but grin. With this 12 trillion, we can definitely overcome the energy crisis. He initially thought that even if the country could get through this crisis, it would suffer significant damage. But now, with this influx of 12 trillion in funds, the country would only sustain minor injuries. Su Chen truly blesses our nation, Qianjin remarked. Chapter 190. Is the certain power running away? In the vast and boundless desert, the sun blazed down upon the earth. The presence of the Desert Coalition was particularly imposing due to the 60 individual combat mechs. These mechs stood like steel giants on the parade ground, exuding a chilling power. Each mech seemed like an unshakable battle vehicle, with advanced technology and formidable deterrent capabilities that instilled fear. At the same time, they provided a significant boost in confidence to the high-ranking officials. They were no longer the submissive figures of the past. Although a considerable amount of money had been spent, they believed it was well worth it. The high-ranking officials of Crawley looked at the mechs with a surge of strong fighting spirit. One of them suddenly proposed, "Why don't we go straight to the enemy's homeland and let them experience the pain brought by technological superiority?" The previously timid Crawley officials now felt a surge of immense courage. Agreed. Let's fly to their homeland and take down their Statue of Liberty. A representative from the Pyramid Nation immediately expressed support, eager to take revenge for the destroyed oil wells and make the enemy pay for their actions. However, Prince Odebao fell into deep thought. He calmly analyzed. Although the individual combat mechs have great speed and endurance, our warriors will inevitably feel fatigued after flying over, and we want to be in peak condition to confront the enemy. I fear there might be unexpected changes. After Odebao spoke, the other officials nodded in agreement. Realizing the risks of the plan, the enemy's strength was well known, and it was uncertain whether they had any hidden cards. Attacking their homeland could likely trigger the S3 season. Whether they truly had the capability to initiate this war was also uncertain. At that moment, someone proposed a new idea. Since we are seeking revenge, we don't necessarily need to strike their homeland. The enemy has bases stationed nearby in the Middle East. We can target their military bases first. Upon hearing this idea, everyone felt it was a good plan. This approach could achieve the goal of revenge while avoiding the significant risks of direct confrontation with the enemy's homeland. However, there was a problem. They did not know the exact locations of the enemy's military bases. After all, military bases are typically highly secretive. Odebao began to emerge as the overall commander of the Desert Alliance, and in terms of military strength, they possessed 1/3 of the mech army, making them the strongest. Former Commander General Muller had now become Odebao's assistant, offering strategies and advice. Odebao immediately ordered the mech army to search for the enemy's military bases. As long as we put in the effort, we will definitely find their bases. These advanced reconnaissance mechs, equipped with cutting-edge technology and powerful mobility, were indeed the most suitable scouts. At this time, Muller also contributed intelligence. Our drones previously suspected they had encountered enemy troops in the eastern mountains of Chisha. That area is also close to Daising, and it could likely be the location of the enemy's military base. After receiving this information, Odebao promptly dispatched the mech army to investigate the reported location. He appointed his younger brother, Odefa, as the commander of this mech legion. Odefa was only 20 years old. His skin had been intentionally tanned to a unique chocolate color, and his sharp gaze resembled that of a domesticated beast of prey. There were no objections from the others regarding the decision to appoint the young Odefa as the commander of the mech army. It is worth mentioning that the oil-producing nation was the first among the Desert Alliance to equip itself with individual combat mechs. Initially, Odefa was the captain of the 1st Mech Battalion, having mastered the piloting skills early on. He was the best technician among all mech warriors. Under his leadership, the Mech Battalion performed quite well during the counter-offensive against the enemy. While much of the success was due to the strength of the mechs themselves, the higher-ups only cared about who reaped the rewards of victory. That person would be deemed a hero. The second time, after the countries in the Desert Alliance had all purchased individual combat mechs, they formed a mech corps consisting of 20 units, with Odefa serving as the commander. During the decisive battle against the enemy, they managed to defeat them and gained considerable popularity. Now, with him appointed as the commander for this operation, everyone was pleased. Rest assured, everyone, I will not let you down and will complete this mission beautifully, Odefa said firmly. As the brother of Odefio, he had always had a good relationship with his elder sibling. Even if he wasn't the heir apparent, he wanted to contribute to Odefio and their father, the king. Now that he had another opportunity, he was quite excited. He then led his team toward the target location. Dozens of mechs spread out in a dense formation, creating a vast reconnaissance network. At the same time, with the scanning capabilities of the mech AI, they didn't need to rely on visual cues to locate the military base. The intelligent AI would automatically identify the location based on various clues, including terrain. Odefa sat in the mech cockpit, concentrating on the helmet display screen. Various data and images flashed on the screen as the advanced sensors of the mech searched the surrounding environment. Suddenly, the helmet display shook, and then a shell casing on the ground, 1 kilometer away, was rapidly magnified. The AI's voice sounded. Through analysis, this shell casing is approximately 3 days old, and this type of bullet is primarily used by the enemy forces. They narrowed down the reconnaissance area based on the shell casing's clues. Soon, other mech warriors also discovered some traces. This information was exchanged through a common channel and was ultimately compiled by the AI into Odefa's system. Before long, the AI synthesized voice sounded again. He had actually located the military base. It even thoughtfully marked the coordinates. Based on these coordinates, Odefa's core successfully identified the military base. Even though Odefa was already familiar with this mech, he was still taken aback by its capabilities. He couldn't help but think, the technology of this mech is truly advanced. With such weapons, how could the Desert Alliance not seek revenge? At the Desert Alliance headquarters, high-ranking officials from various countries were still discussing ways to locate the enemy's base when Odefa initiated communication. Reporting to headquarters, we have located the military base. Odefio was taken aback. Your speed is astonishing. We are still speculating about where the military base might be located. But you found it right away. Odd exclaimed excitedly. To be precise, it's thanks to the mech AI. It helped us locate the military base based on some traces, even providing detailed coordinates. When we went over, it indeed turned out to be a military base. Everyone was incredulous, marveling at how advanced the mech technology was. Then, Odd exchanged glances with the senior officials from various countries and commanded, since we've found it, let's take action. Your current mission is to destroy the base. For any surrendering captives, just execute them on the spot. The officials from the Pyramid Nation hesitated, expressing concerns. Won't this provoke a fierce retaliation? Odd firmly replied, what is there to fear? We have the Mech Legion on our side. Why should we be afraid of them? Thinking of the powerful and terrifying Mech Legion, the senior officials from the Pyramid Nation fell silent. Odd instructed his brother to carry out the orders. At that moment, a somewhat angry voice came through the microphone. Tame it. What the heck? There's no one at the base. Odd's voice echoed at the Desert Alliance headquarters, leaving everyone stunned. Chapter 191. Deploying troops to victory. Target. Annihilation. What on earth? No one. How could such a large military base possibly have no one there? When Odd and the others learned that the base was completely deserted, their faces were instantly filled with shock and confusion. It felt as if time had frozen at that moment, and the air was thick with a suffocating sense of bewilderment. Worried that the people at headquarters wouldn't believe this bizarre situation, Odd quickly took action. He skillfully operated the equipment to transmit the actual situation at the site via video to headquarters. On the big screen at headquarters, the image of the disordered and empty base appeared. The strong winds howled, kicking up clouds of yellow sand, and under the swirling dust, the base looked particularly desolate, as if it had been forgotten by the world in this barren land. Everyone stared at the screen, their eyes wide open in disbelief. Their minds racing with questions. Where did all the people in this vast base go? Did they run away? After a rigorous assessment by the mech AI, it concluded that the personnel at the military base had likely left about a week ago. General Mueller's expression turned serious. The construction of a military base involves massive financial investment, costing at least tens of billions. The fact that they could abandon it so decisively clearly indicates they were wary. They might have feared that the people inside would be destroyed along with the base, which is why they fled. Otherwise, based on their usual way of doing things, they would never easily give it up. At this moment, Odd suddenly realized, and his anger flared up. So, they were afraid of us, afraid of being exposed, and worried about our retaliation, which is why they fled early. Ultimately, it's really these guys doing. Previously provided evidence from a certain nation, combined with the current reaction from a certain country, points all clues towards them. Now, they are completely convinced that this nation has sabotaged their oil wells. It is they who have brought a significant energy crisis to the Desert Alliance. Before this, there was still a hint of worry in the mind of a certain leader, fearing that they might have misjudged the target. After all, this nation is a superpower, and a misjudgment could lead to unpredictable consequences. That's why they adopted a relatively lenient policy towards potential surrendering individuals at the military base, rather than executing them without mercy. However, now that the culprit has been confirmed to be this nation, their gaze has become firm and cold, clenching their fists. They said resolutely, continue searching for their other bases. We must make them pay for their actions. General Mueller nodded slightly, agreeing with this leader's thoughts, but also expressed his concerns, stating, if this base was able to pack up and leave so quickly, the others likely will too. They must have been prepared, and our next actions may not go as smoothly. Upon hearing this, the leader's fighting spirit was undiminished. They gritted their teeth and defiantly said, then let's strike at their homeland. I refuse to believe they can keep hiding. At this moment, high-ranking officials from another organization were looking at messages on their phones, their expressions growing increasingly grim, ultimately shaking with anger. Those around them noticed something was off and cast questioning glances. This is outrageous, the high-ranking official exclaimed. Everyone paused for a moment. What is going on? Could there be something even more distressing than letting the culprit escape? Take a look for yourselves. The high-ranking official quickly operated their device, sending a message to the headquarters system. As everyone gathered to check, they discovered that senior officials from a rival organization had publicly mocked the Desert Alliance in the media, stating they deserved their plight. The comments were harsh, suggesting that the energy crisis faced by the Desert Alliance was divine punishment. Even more infuriating was the fact that citizens from this rival nation were supporting these statements, openly ridiculing the desert nations as a bunch of foolish nouveau riche. claiming that divine punishment would continue to befall them. This was no longer just a simple verbal attack. It touched upon the beliefs of the people in the Desert Alliance and struck deeply at their hearts. Just as everyone was still engulfed in anger, officials from the intelligence department hurried in, bringing even more shocking news. Business people from the rival nation were profiting immensely from this energy crisis. They seemed to have insider information about the impending energy issues of the Desert Alliance and had prepared in advance, acquiring large amounts of oil before the crisis erupted. Now, with energy prices skyrocketing, they were recklessly flooding the market with the oil they had bought, reaping enormous profits. It was reported that one tycoon from this rival nation made profits of several $100 billion in just 1 week. This news was like adding fuel to the fire, causing the prince's anger to boil over. Publicly insulting us is just the beginning. How dare they profit from our national crisis? Good, good, good. Prince Adbo's eyes were bloodshot as he repeated good 3 times, then shouted loudly. It seems the previous lesson was not thorough enough. I suggest we directly annihilate the rival nation. His suggestion was like a boulder thrown into a calm lake, leaving everyone momentarily stunned. However, thinking about the suffering within their own country while the rival nation mocks them and even profits from their pain, the previously unresolved hatred flared up like a raging fire. Now, the high-ranking officials of other countries in the alliance were completely enraged. They immediately agreed to the military plan against the rival nation. Thus, Outer received an urgent order. This time, he directly commanded his powerful mech army to invade the rival nation. Their mission was heavy and challenging, to destroy the rival nation and seek justice for the humiliation and losses suffered by the alliance. Outa understood the heavy responsibility on his shoulders. He immediately gathered the warriors of the mech army for intense pre-battle preparations. The warriors looked solemn, filled with anger towards the rival nation's misdeeds and a strong desire for victory. Amid the roar of the mechs, a steel torrent of troops marched towards the rival nation. They carried unwavering faith and fearless courage, empowered by their beliefs and hatred, becoming as formidable and fearless as true steel warriors. Chapter 192. High-ranking officials flee. Meanwhile, at the airport of the rival nation, the private jet designated solely for the high-ranking officials was quietly parked on the runway. The sunlight bathed the aircraft, but it couldn't dispel the tense and uneasy atmosphere inside. Soon, the passenger plane took off, leaving this land behind. The family of the nation's president, along with other high-ranking officials, hurriedly boarded the flight to a distant country. Inside the cabin, an aide asked the president with concern, "Is it really okay for us to leave like this? Those taxpayers will surely curse us to death." The aide's voice carried a hint of reluctance and helplessness as he looked out at the familiar airport scenery, feeling a mix of emotions. The president's expression was grim. He coldly snorted and said, "It's better to be cursed by them than to be killed by those from the alliance. Don't you understand?" A glimmer of determination and fear was evident in the president's eyes. The aide still seemed confused and continued, "But the plan was devised by them. It has nothing to do with us. Why do we need to run?" After hearing this, the president shot him an angry glare and scolded, "You are incredibly foolish. If the situation is exposed, can the alliance's forces defeat the distant country? They will definitely vent their anger on us first. At that point, we will surely suffer. If we don't run now, we won't be able to escape later." The president's words were filled with anxiety and concern about the future situation. After hearing this, the subordinates were furious, clenching their fists and displaying angry expressions. Clearly, some among them were unwilling to flee just like that. One person angrily said, "It's all those despicable countries' fault. They managed to develop such mechas. Now our aircraft are at risk of being taken out by those desert factions. This has led to our complete loss of air superiority. To them, our ground forces are nothing but targets. We have no means to fight back." His voice trembled with anger, and his eyes were filled with hatred towards the development of mechas by those countries. The main issue was that they could develop such powerful weapons, but didn't he know to keep them as a trump card? Why sell them to those desert nations? If they were going to sell, why not sell to us? Isn't this deliberately seeking trouble for us? Another person echoed this sentiment, his face showing dissatisfaction and jealousy. At this moment, the president suddenly sneered and said, "As for those countries, let us forget it. They are currently caught in a crisis orchestrated by external forces, and chaos is likely to ensue. Our experts have analyzed their energy structure, and they rely too heavily on external sources. This is a fatal flaw. It's going to be very difficult for them to get through this crisis. And even if they barely manage, it will severely cripple them. It could set their economy back by 30 to 40 years. By that time, without support from those countries, we can easily handle them if we unite with external forces." As he spoke, a sinister glint flashed across the president's face, as if he could already envision their victory over the Desert Alliance. Everyone nodded in agreement, seeming to see a glimmer of hope. Suddenly, someone laughed and said, "Anyway, we're not at a loss. Thanks to the recent actions of external forces, we've stockpiled a large amount of oil in advance and made a considerable profit. This money is enough for us to live comfortably for several generations. We can enjoy the suffering of those countries as a fine wine when we leave." The laughter of these high-ranking officials filled the aircraft, as if they had completely forgotten the nation and fellow citizens they were about to abandon. At that moment, the president's young son curiously asked, "Dad, are we really going to abandon our fellow citizens and run away alone?" His eyes were full of innocence and confusion as he looked at the president, hoping for an answer. President Daisheng patted his son's head and said, "Dear, we are not running away. We are just temporarily avoiding risks. Once the situation stabilizes, we will return." His words carried a hint of comfort, but his eyes flickered, as if he himself was uncertain about returning. The young son nodded thoughtfully, and then the president added, "But Yax, you must remember this hatred. This is all the doing of the Desert Alliance and those countries. You must remember them. We cannot forget this hatred." The young son nodded solemnly and said, "Don't worry, father, I will remember. One day, I will make the people of the Desert Nation and the Dragon Kingdom pay for their foolish actions." Laughter echoed once again in the passenger plane, but it was filled with hypocrisy and selfishness. The president stood up and looked towards the homeland, which was gradually receding from view, feeling no nostalgia, but rather a sense of being closer to freedom. He thought to himself that as long as he could escape this place on the brink of war, there would still be hope. He was eager to see what would happen next to the Dragon Kingdom and the Desert Alliance. He could almost envision the scene of the Dragon Kingdom and the Desert Alliance struggling in adversity, filled with schadenfreude, as they moved further away from the border. Everyone on the plane sighed in relief, as if they had escaped all dangers. However, suddenly, the plane experienced a violent turbulence. This unexpected jolt instantly shattered the relaxed atmosphere inside the aircraft, and everyone's faces turned pale. The president was startled as well. They were all jumpy, easily frightened by any disturbance. But he was trying hard to maintain his composure. "What is going on? What happened?" he asked the flight attendants. The crew hurriedly checked various equipment, trying to find the cause of the turbulence. His subordinates were also in a panic, speculating about what might be happening. Someone shouted, "Is there a malfunction with the plane?" Another person nervously said, "Could we possibly be under attack?" The cabin was thrown into chaos, with fear permeating every corner. However, they soon heard a response. "It's okay, Mr. President. We just passed through an area of unstable air currents, which caused some turbulence. We are safe now." Upon hearing that everything was fine, everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. "You scared me. I thought we were being targeted. A false alarm, just a false alarm." The president reassured everyone. But just as his words fell, a deafening alarm suddenly blared. This sudden alarm completely stunned the senior officials on the plane. Chapter 193. This time, it's really over. In that suffocatingly tense sky, due to the sudden alarm, the passenger plane carrying the senior officials descended into chaos and panic once again. Someone tried to comfort everyone. "It's okay, there must be some kind of issue. It will be resolved soon." But just as he finished speaking, the flight attendants shouted in a panic, "Gentlemen, we are being targeted by an unidentified forces weapon." This exclamation sounded like thunder in the cabin. Everyone was taken aback, their faces filled with terror. "What? We haven't even left the borders yet, and we're already being targeted? What force is so audacious?" Someone trembled as they spoke, their eyes revealing deep unease. The president forced himself to remain calm, trying to soothe the crowd's emotions. He said loudly, "There's no need to panic. We have nothing to fear from them. We have fighter jets escorting us. What are we afraid of?" With that, he quickly ordered to contact the escorting fighter jets. That was more than 30 advanced fourth-generation fighter jets. Upon receiving the command, they swiftly formed a protective formation around the high-level aircraft in the center, like a group of loyal guardians. However, the president felt a twinge of anxiety, knowing he could not show any sign of weakness at that moment. Meanwhile, in a different direction from the main force, the situation was changing dramatically. On the other side, a leader was driving a mech, leading a portion of the team aggressively towards the eastern front, aiming directly at the central city. Another group advanced from the west, like a torrent of steel, with unstoppable momentum. Two additional teams were heading towards the central city from the north and south, converging from all directions to deliver a heavy blow. At that moment, a message came from the western squad leader. "We have spotted a passenger plane flying out from the central city." Initially, the leader did not want to pay attention to this, as capturing the city was the priority. But the subordinate quickly reported, "There are dozens of fighter jets escorting the plane." Upon hearing this, the leader's interest was piqued, and he immediately ordered, "Intercept it. We must intercept it. There must be important figures on that plane. The personnel at the base have already fled. We cannot let anyone on that plane escape." Hearing this, the squad leader's subordinate asked in confusion, "How do we intercept it?" Without hesitation, the leader replied, "Of course, we will use our hands. First, eliminate those fighter jets." "Yes, let's take out those fighter jets first." Thus, a squad of 15 mechs surged forward like arrows, heading straight for the fighter jets. Meanwhile, the president of the central city, seeing dozens of jets providing escort, felt a temporary sense of relief. He immediately asked the person in charge of the passenger plane, "Who is locked onto us?" The pilot, equally bewildered, replied, "We don't know. Maybe some bad guys are trying to scare us." The president feigned calmness and said, "Let us hope so." However, just as he finished speaking, a series of deafening explosions erupted around them. Flames shot into the sky, and thick smoke billowed upwards. The flaming wreckage of fighter jets scattered in the air like blooming roses. Seeing this, the high-level officials broke into a cold sweat, their bodies trembling involuntarily. This was not a scare tactic. They were serious. The president's youngest son was terrified and cried out, "Dad, let us surrender. I don't want to die." The president was completely stunned. He had not yet processed what was happening when another round of explosions sounded, and several more fighter jets were destroyed in an instant. Debris flying everywhere. The scene was truly horrifying. The high-ranking officials turned pale, drenched in cold sweat. Their own fighter jets were constantly exploding. Yet they had no idea who was attacking them, leaving them feeling utterly bewildered and desperate. As the situation deteriorated and their aircraft had already been destroyed in large numbers, the president felt a surge of anxiety and shouted, "Accelerate! Shake them off! We can't let our pilots sacrifice themselves for nothing." Although the captain was filled with resentment towards the higher-ups for their retreat, there was nothing he could do at that moment and could only brace himself to prepare for acceleration. Just then, right in front of them, the true face of the threat was revealed. Upon seeing those figures, the president's expression turned grave, as if he had witnessed the apocalypse. Other high-ranking officials also stood up, their gazes fixed in shock, as if they were frozen in place, seemingly witnessing something extraordinarily terrifying. In front of them stood 15 mechs, perfectly aligned. The bodies gleamed with a cold metallic sheen, appearing especially imposing and fearsome under the sunlight. "It's a demon! It's a demon! Daddy, drive them away!" The terrified screams of the president's young son jolted everyone back to reality. What these mechs represented as heroic in the minds of the Desert Alliance was seen as a symbol of evil in the eyes of the frightened child, who was filled with fear and despair. The president fully grasped the situation now. The attackers were actually the mech warriors of the Desert Alliance. He knew that against such powerful mechs, they had no chance of escaping. "Turn back! Quickly, turn back!" The president shouted hoarsely, his voice filled with endless terror and despair. The pilot, not daring to hesitate, immediately turned the aircraft back towards their homeland. However, the sounds of explosions continued to ring in their ears, like the footsteps of death, closely following them. The president was in a state of panic, his mind a chaotic mess, completely unable to comprehend why the opposing side would attack their aircraft like this. Did the members of the Desert Alliance know the truth and come to seek revenge? He speculated in his mind, filled with regret and fear. The higher-ups were also in disarray, their previous confidence aboard the plane completely vanished. Their faces were as pale as paper, bodies trembling, eyes filled with despair and helplessness. At that moment, the captain suddenly noticed that the dots representing the escort aircraft on the radar had completely disappeared. He gravely informed everyone, "All our escort aircraft have been shot down." This news was like a heavy bomb, stirring up waves of panic within them. They were stunned, sitting in their seats as if they had lost their souls. Without the escorting aircraft, their passenger plane would have to face 15 single-pilot mechs alone. It was known that just one of those mechs could destroy an entire squadron, so dealing with their passenger plane would be a piece of cake. In a state of confusion, the president asked the captain, "Does the passenger plane have any weapons?" The captain, taken aback, looked at the president in disbelief, as if he were looking at a madman, and replied, "You still want to counterattack?" President Daishin quickly realized that his thoughts were somewhat unrealistic. Not to mention that it was impossible to equip weapons on a passenger plane, even if it were equipped. It would certainly not stand a chance against more than a dozen mechs. The situation had reached a critical point. Just then, they suddenly felt the plane jolt violently, and the entire fuselage shook intensely. After this bout of turbulence, the plane unexpectedly turned around. President Daisheng was taken aback and angrily questioned the pilot. "Why are we turning around?" The pilot, looking bewildered and frightened, stammered, "We didn't turn around. The plane turned by itself." President Daisheng immediately erupted in anger. "You traitors, do you really think I'm a fool? How could the plane turn by itself? You are all traitors." However, they soon understood what was happening. At the front of the passenger plane, 2 mechs were gripping the aircraft, and the propulsion devices behind them activated, instantly neutralizing the thrust produced by the plane itself, easily changing its direction. In other words, the flight of the passenger aircraft was now entirely reliant on the mechs for propulsion. They were being pushed forward toward an unknown direction. President Daisheng swallowed hard. Glancing down, he could roughly guess what was happening. If he wasn't mistaken, there were many mechs supporting the plane beneath him. In other words, they were being carried by the mechs, like a helpless little bird in the hands of a giant. President Daisheng was greatly frightened. Now there was no way out. He quickly ordered the captain, "Is there any way to contact them? I want to negotiate." Chapter 194, The Arrival of the Mech Army. Desert Alliance Headquarters. They had just finished communication with Odefa when suddenly, Odefa's voice came through the microphone again, this time filled with excitement and pride. He said to everyone, "It seems we have captured a high-ranking official from the Daisheng Nation." Upon hearing this, Ode Biao immediately perked up and hurriedly asked, "How did you catch them?" Odefa recounted the details. "They tried to escape by plane, but we discovered them. We decisively destroyed their escort fighters and successfully captured them." After hearing this news, the high-ranking officials of the Desert Alliance quickly reacted. It seemed these guys were planning to flee. Luckily, they were caught. One of the high-ranking officials remarked, a look of relief on his face. Ode Biao's eyes flashed with ruthlessness, and he angrily stated, "Just kill them. Not killing them is not enough to vent my anger." However, General Muller raised his hand to stop Ode Biao. His face also bore anger, but more than that, it was calmness after careful consideration. He said loudly, "Let them witness the fall of their homeland. That seems to be more satisfying." Others expressed doubt after hearing this. These people are trying to flee at such a time. Do you think they care about their so-called homeland and citizens? General Muller furrowed his brow slightly, and, after a moment of contemplation, proposed again, "Let's have them paraded on our territory. We can hold an event called the High-Level Humiliation Conference, where we will showcase their leaders across our nations to vent public anger and alleviate the psychological pressure brought on by the energy crisis. What do you all think?" Upon hearing this, Ode Biao's eyes lit up, and he gave a thumbs up, exclaiming, "That's a great idea." He immediately instructed his brother to bring those leaders over. Ode Fa readily agreed, and as he was about to end the communication, Ode Biao told him to lead the mech army back first, as they felt it necessary to redeploy their operational tasks against the target. Ode Fa did not arrogantly assume that their mechs could easily conquer the target, but instead followed his brother's orders and notified his subordinates. After hanging up, a smile appeared on Ode Biao's face. This was the first time he felt happy since the outbreak of the energy crisis in his homeland. Especially at the thought of seeing the target's leaders in a state of embarrassment, his lips couldn't help but curl upward, filled with anticipation and a sense of revenge. At this moment, General Muller curiously remarked, "I wonder how our mech warriors will bring those leaders here. The mechs are not slow, but the leaders aren't in mechs. Are we supposed to have our warriors carry them over?" Everyone fell into thought, showing puzzled expressions. Just then, they noticed something approaching from a distance. They looked over skeptically. At first, it was just a vague outline, but as it drew closer, they could see clearly, and their jaws nearly dropped. A group of mech warriors was rapidly approaching, holding an aircraft in their hands. The aircraft, being cradled by the mechs, appeared exceedingly small, like a toy effortlessly controlled by giants. Witnessing this scene, everyone was left speechless, and the atmosphere was so quiet that only the sound of the wind and their hurried breaths could be heard. After a while, one of the leaders exclaimed in astonishment, "Wow, they really brought it over, carrying the plane along with the people." This scene shocked them all, and they once again gained a profound understanding of the powerful capabilities of the mechs manufactured by the nation in question. It seemed that only those mechs could perform such a feat, another leader remarked, filled with admiration and awe for the technological prowess of the nation. At this point, the aircraft's doors slowly opened, and the president of the target nation stepped out with an awkward smile on his face. He tried to mask his inner fear and unease with a smile, but it appeared pale and weak. He looked at the high-ranking officials of the Desert Alliance with a friendly and calm demeanor, as if attempting to convey goodwill. The high-ranking officials of the Desert Alliance watched him with smiles, yet those smiles were filled with mockery and the demeanor of victors. The scene was unexpectedly harmonious, but it was permeated with an eerie atmosphere of extreme tension. "Your country's way of sending people over is quite special," the president forced a calm smile and said, attempting to break the suffocating silence. Suddenly, the expression of Odbo turned cold. He stared intently at the president, his eyes filled with disdain and anger. "You really know how to give yourself a way out," Odbo said bluntly. "Did we invite you here? You are about to become a nation of slaves." After hearing this, the president broke into a fine cold sweat. His smile froze instantly, and a hint of panic flashed in his eyes. "Respected Prince Odbo, what are you talking about? I thought our enmity had been resolved." The president tried to argue, his voice trembling slightly. Odbo snorted coldly and replied angrily, "That was before. We indeed thought you had calmed down, but unexpectedly, you are still taking advantage of our energy crisis to profit from our national disaster. Your malice is truly ingrained." At that moment, the president's son suddenly spoke up, a hint of childish stubbornness and ignorant arrogance on his face. "The capital market is inherently cruel. The victors deserve to enjoy champagne, while the losers should bear the pain." Clearly, this was something he had been told by his presidential father. His words stunned everyone, and after a brief silence, Odbo suddenly laughed again, his laughter filled with mockery and disdain. All right, Odbo repeated 3 times. "Little friend, you speak very well. But let me tell you one more thing. Losers can also vent their anger. That means picking up weapons and pointing them at the so-called victors." Clearly, the young boy did not understand the deeper meaning of Odbo's words. He merely looked at him in confusion, his eyes filled with bewilderment. The president felt a strong sense of hatred from the desert nation, causing his body to tremble involuntarily. He suddenly spoke, his voice tinged with despair and fear. "So, what do you want to do?" Odbo looked at him coldly. "Very simple. We want revenge." The president hurriedly replied, "The oil wells in your country were not destroyed by us. You have the wrong person. You can't seek revenge on us." Odbo disdainfully responded, "It's not just about the oil wells." The president was stunned. He realized that they were aware of how they had profited from the misfortunes of the Desert Alliance and the unresolved hatred that had completely enraged them. The thought of Odbo's earlier mention of becoming a nation of slaves made him shudder, as if he could see the tragic fate his country was about to face. "You want to destroy my country?" the president asked, his voice trembling with fear and disbelief. Odbo sneered and said, "Only just now are you realizing this?" The president attempted a final struggle, exclaiming, "Is that all you have with those 20 mechs? We are putting forth our national strength. We might not be unable to resist them." Admitting defeat before was just due to the terrifying cost, but once we decide to fight to the end, they won't have a good outcome either. Upon hearing this, Ode Biao revealed a mocking smile and sneered, 20 mechas? Who told you we only have 20 mechas?" President Daising was taken aback. The intelligence they received earlier indicated that the Desert Alliance had a total of 20 mechas. He wanted to say that the other party was trying to scare them and that their intelligence was accurate, but before he could speak, a series of howls suddenly echoed in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw numerous black dots appearing from all directions. As these dots approached, their true forms were revealed, dense and numerous. They were all mechas. The high-ranking officials of Daising couldn't help but gasp in shock. They roughly counted and found there were as many as 60. 60 mechas loomed in the sky like a cloud of steel. The people on Daising's side were completely stunned. Just a moment ago, there were only 20 mechas. How could the Desert Alliance possibly have so many now? If this mech army invaded Daising, their country might truly face the threat of extinction. Their faces turned pale, and their bodies felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. At this moment, they finally realized that the Desert Alliance was serious. Moreover, it was a brutal game in which they had no chance of winning. President Daising stared blankly at the mechas in the sky, filled with despair. He knew that the fate of Daising might have already been sealed at that moment. Chapter 195. This strategy is sufficient. At the Desert Alliance base, 60 mechas stood tall like steel giants. They exuded not only a cold metallic aura, but also a powerful and awe-inspiring presence. The sunlight shone on the mecha surfaces, reflecting dazzling light, as if declaring their strength to the world. Each mech had smooth lines and a majestic shape, their weapon systems glimmering, seemingly eager to showcase their prowess on the battlefield. Ode led all the mechas back and immediately asked Ode Biao for the latest instructions. Ode Biao stood in front of everyone, his gaze firm and passionate, loudly declaring, "We need to formulate a new plan for the annihilation of Daising." For this, he was even willing to recall all the mechas once again. Upon hearing this, everyone stared blankly at Ode Biao. From his tone and demeanor, they deeply realized that this time Ode Biao was determined to take real annihilation actions against Daising. Previously, although they had always talked about annihilating Daising, it was more about wanting the mech core to cause some destruction on Daising's territory, teaching them a lesson and instilling fear. They hadn't even seriously formulated a detailed plan, merely holding a mindset of revenge and demonstration. Therefore, these individuals regarded the earlier so-called annihilation orders as mere acts of destruction against Daising, without truly intending to completely eradicate the country. However, deep down in everyone's heart, there is a lingering thought, as the actions of the leader have severely harmed the interests and dignity of the alliance. The idea of total annihilation has only been temporarily suppressed due to the perceived difficulty. Looking at everyone, the commander asked, "What are your thoughts on the upcoming plan?" Upon hearing this, the group fell into a moment of contemplation. They understood the importance of this operation and needed to come up with a practical plan. After a while, their gazes ultimately focused on General Muller, who was the most skilled in combat. General Muller stood there, his gaze firmly fixed on the imposing mech legion. Then, he calmly smiled slightly, and a simple plan quickly emerged in his mind. He cleared his throat and said, "It's quite simple. We just need to position the mech legion near the leader's border, and by doing nothing there, we can create chaos for them." The leader has previously suffered losses against the mech legion, and they are well aware of its formidable power. Once a large number of mechs appear at the border, they will undoubtedly panic and gather all their forces to counterattack. This will leave their defenses in other areas extremely weak. When the mech army engages their border troops, we can then launch a surprise attack from behind and seize their capital. This will surely allow us to swiftly take down the leader. Everyone nodded in agreement upon hearing General Muller's words. They knew well the deep fear and helplessness the leader felt in the face of the mech legion. And this plan cleverly exploited that psychology, catching them off guard and striking when they were unprepared, making it a highly feasible strategy. The higher-ups from the allied nations looked at each other with admiration, captivated by General Muller's scheme, and one of them couldn't help but exclaim, as expected of General Muller, a master of strategy. General Muller was usually very confident, but at that moment, facing everyone's praise, he suddenly became humble, smiling and waving his hand. "You're overestimating me. This strategy is really nothing. Ultimately, it's still our mech legion that is strong enough. My plan is merely an embellishment on top of that strength." The commander also expressed high recognition of General Muller's strategy, his eyes sparkling with excitement as he immediately said, "Since the battle plan is set, let's get started." General Muller hesitated for a moment and said, "Have you all decided? This plan is just something I thought of casually. I've only made some simple strategic deployments and haven't even used more complex tactics like psychological warfare. Given that this is a plan for total annihilation, I think we should be cautious." The group exchanged smiles, their eyes revealing determination and resolve. This strategy was already sufficient. Thus, that day, the nations of the Desert Alliance quickly began to gather their forces. Once the orders were given, the armies of each nation swiftly mobilized. The military camp was bustling with activity, as soldiers hurriedly organized their equipment and checked their weapons. Vehicles rolled out of the camp one after another, heading towards designated assembly points, the roar of their engines deafening. Meanwhile, communication personnel were busy relaying various messages, ensuring coordination and cooperation among different units. In terms of logistical support, supplies were being allocated in an orderly manner to ensure the army's provisions during operations. The entire coalition was enveloped in a tense yet exhilarating atmosphere, as everyone knew that a war that would determine their fate was about to begin. At the same time, a mechanized legion, led by a commander, was advancing towards the northern border. The mechs soared through the sky like a group of steel behemoths, their silhouettes casting an ominous shadow, creating a powerful sense of pressure. Meanwhile, in the military command center, a general was furrowing his brow as he dealt with various matters. Just then, a subordinate approached to deliver news. "General, the president and senior officials have departed on a passenger plane." Upon hearing this, the general set down the document in his hand and pinched the bridge of his nose, a wave of unnameable anger surging within him. In the command center, other high-ranking military officials were also present, and they too were furious upon hearing the news. Just as they were about to curse those traitors, another subordinate reported, "However, They were attacked by an unidentified force en route. All escorting aircraft have been destroyed, and even their private plane has been hijacked. At this revelation, the general was first taken aback, then a mix of shock and anger washed over his face. How could these despicable individuals flee at such a critical moment? And to be hijacked as well? He couldn't help but curse loudly, filled with rage and helplessness. At this crucial moment, the president and senior officials fleeing would undoubtedly plunge the entire nation into chaos without leadership. It must be those from the coalition who took action against us. The general gritted his teeth, his eyes revealing deep hatred. Yet at the same time, he was filled with worry. With the leadership gone, what if the coalition decided to strike us? Chapter 196, A Nation in Arms. The general paced back and forth in the command center. With the president and senior officials hijacked, they had no choice but to take command in a crisis. One of the generals under him questioned, "Are we sure it was the coalition? We had already conceded to them. Why would they attack us? It could be some criminal organization." Faced with his subordinates' doubts, the general could only remain silent. Like the president, he was part of the upper echelon, fully aware of the situation. He had chosen to stand firm for his country rather than flee. However, he worried that revealing the full truth would severely impact the leadership's image among the public and lead to greater domestic unrest. He fell silent for a moment before slowly saying, "Now is not the time to get tangled up in this, regardless of who is behind it. We must be prepared to respond." Just then, one of his subordinates suddenly reported, "General, a large number of Mechs have appeared at our western border." Stanford's heart sank like a stone. So fast? Are they ready for war? He muttered to himself, his expression turning extremely serious. His subordinate was equally startled by this sudden news. They had experienced the combat power of the Desert Alliance's Mechs, and the memory of that overwhelming strength still haunted them. "General, I request to mobilize all our forces to deal with the incoming Mechs," one officer suggested. After listening, Stanford furrowed his brow and pondered for a long time before firmly stating, "No. If we mobilize all our troops to confront those Mechs, we will leave ourselves vulnerable in other areas. If they gather forces and attack from our rear, we would be caught in a pincer." His words plunged everyone into silence. As they were well aware of the significant risks involved, Stanford tried to calm himself and reassure his subordinates. The Desert Alliance only has 20 Mechs. Even if we deploy half of our army, we can hold them at bay. At that time, we can seek assistance from external allies and pressure them through public opinion. Perhaps we can alleviate their offensive or gain some negotiating space. The others felt helpless. It seemed they had no choice but to adopt this approach for now. At this moment, the subordinate who had reported the situation spoke with a tone of despair. "Half our forces may not be enough." Stanford's brow furrowed tightly as he sternly replied, "Let the soldiers have the resolve to fight for their homeland. That should be sufficient." The previous submission to the Desert Alliance was because resisting was not in our favor. But that does not mean we would lose if we fought them to the bitter end. He almost gritted his teeth as he said this. However, the subordinate's words filled him with despair. "General, the Western Front does not have just 20 Mechs. It has a full 60. The subordinate's voice trembled. Upon hearing this, the officers were instantly dumbfounded. They exchanged glances, their faces filled with shock and fear. Stanford was momentarily stunned, his voice trembling as he questioned his subordinate. "Don't joke around. The Desert Alliance only had 20 Mechs before. How could there be 60 now? That's absolutely impossible." The subordinate urgently explained, "It's absolutely true, and they haven't attacked. They've just been quietly hovering outside the border." After speaking, the subordinate quickly sent over a video recorded by the border troops. Stanford opened the video with trembling hands. When he saw the 60 imposing Mechs neatly lined up in the air outside the border, he was completely dumbfounded. Just the sight of their might made this pillar of strength lose all will to fight. Each Mech glimmered with a cold metallic sheen under the sunlight, exuding an invincible aura. 60 Mechs, how are we supposed to fight against that? Stanford muttered in despair, frantically rummaging through all his strategies and tactics in his mind, trying to find a glimmer of hope. But he realized that these plans and strategies seemed so powerless in the face of overwhelming force. A deep sense of despair enveloped him, as if the entire world was collapsing at that moment. However, just when everyone else fell into despair, one general refused to give up. He stood up abruptly and shouted, "Gather the troops and prepare for a decisive battle at the border. At the same time, organize the militia to guard the rear. We swear to coexist with our nation." Inside a bar in the capital, the lights flickered and the music blared, as people immersed themselves in the hedonistic atmosphere. Soon, rumors of an impending war with the Desert Alliance spread like ghosts through the crowd, but the citizens seemed largely unconcerned. They believed this time would be like the last. The higher-ups would make concessions to end the war, and it had nothing to do with them as civilians. The young people continued to dance and revel in the bar, twisting their bodies to the music while cursing the nations of the Desert Alliance. "Once we rise, we won't let these guys off the hook. I want them to be our slaves, just like the black slaves of a century ago. Just wait, one day, we will take our revenge." They shouted loudly, as if war was a distant topic, completely unrelated to their lives. They were not afraid at all, for in their minds, it was the soldiers who would die in battle, not them. So, they continued to celebrate, shouting, "Keep the music playing, keep dancing." However, just as they were indulging in their enjoyment, a squad of soldiers burst in like a whirlwind. The soldiers, with stern expressions and swift movements, began to grab the young people and drag them outside. This sudden turn of events terrified the group, who screamed in panic. thinking that the forces from the Desert Alliance had come to attack. But when they realized it was their own country's army, they were even more furious and resisted, shouting, "Why are you arresting us? We are your people. Aren't you supposed to protect us? Why are you turning against us?" The soldiers replied sternly, "The Desert Alliance is coming in full force. Since you know we are your own, grab your weapons and defend your country." At this moment, those who thought war had nothing to do with them were completely stunned. The smiles on their faces vanished, replaced by fear and helplessness. Some cried out, "Mom, I want to go home." The entire bar descended into chaos and panic. Meanwhile, in the dance floor, some women seemed completely unfazed by the sudden turmoil, continuing to dance. They yelled, "What good are you soldiers if you turn against us civilians? What does war have to do with us?" The leading soldier's expression darkened further after hearing this. He said to his subordinates, "Take those women away too. They like to dance, right? Let them dance for our soldiers in the camp." His words were filled with anger. The women, who had thought the war had nothing to do with them just moments ago, now looked horrified. As the soldiers acted, the entire bar was thrown into chaos. Glasses and furniture were knocked to the ground. The music came to an abrupt halt. Chapter 197. The Fall of the Pillar of the Nation. Desert Alliance. Upon hearing that the commander had begun rounding up young people on the streets to serve as militia, General Muller fell into deep thought. He speculated that the commander had learned of their plans, which was why he was frantically expanding his forces, trying to avoid being caught in a pincer attack. But how could a group of inexperienced individuals fight against our regular army? General Muller thought to himself, revealing a hint of disdain on his face. At this moment, they received news that the commander had gathered a large number of troops along the border, seemingly ready to engage in battle with the Desert Alliance at any time. As General Muller looked at the troop deployment of the commander's forces marked on the map, his gaze sharpened. He carefully analyzed the situation and felt that the time was almost right. It was time to take action, General Muller said firmly, then turned to look at ODBO. ODBO immediately issued the order, "Mecha Legion, move out." With this order given, the entire camp of the Desert Alliance became bustling with activity. The mecha units charged forth like beasts released from their cages, racing towards the commander's troops. On the commander's side, upon learning that the Desert Alliance's Mecha Legion had mobilized, they quickly launched a counterattack. Faced with the mechas, the ground troops appeared utterly powerless. They had almost no chance to fight back and could only continuously fire into the sky, creating a barrage intended to halt the enemy's advance. The commander's main strength still lay in the Air Force and air defense units. However, in previous conflicts, the commander's aircraft had suffered heavy losses, leaving only a few dozen planes, which were nowhere near enough to contend with the Desert Alliance's powerful mechas. Boom, crackle, bang. Various weapons on the commander's side spat out bullets like flames. Yet they could not stop the Desert Alliance from continuing their advance. The mechas easily inflicted heavy losses on the commander's aircraft. While engaging these aircraft, the mechas also dodged the attacks of air defense missiles. Thanks to the assistance of intelligent AI, the mechas evaded these missiles with ease. The head of the air defense unit was anxious, staring intently at the screen, muttering, "So close. Just a bit more. Again, just a bit more." Every time it seemed their air defense missiles were about to hit the enemy mechas, the targets always managed to evade. In a fit of anger, the head immediately ordered, "Concentrate all missiles on that one mecha." Thus, with only a few remaining aircraft to hold them back, nearly 1,000 air defense missiles from the commander's side targeted a single mecha. Instantly, these missiles transformed into a dense barrage, raining down on the enemy. The pilot of that mecha was none other than ODBO. Faced with the barrage of missiles raining down like raindrops, the pilot remained calm under pressure. Inside the cockpit, he was focused and composed, skillfully maneuvering the mech to perform various practical moves that evaded nearly all the incoming missiles. However, during the intense battle, a moment of negligence allowed one missile to strike the mech directly. Suddenly, a flash of fire erupted in the air, resembling a blooming rose. Yes, the head of the air defense unit clenched his fists in excitement, shouting, "We did it! We hit it!" He was ecstatic in his eyes. Successfully hitting one mech meant the possibility of hitting a second and a third. But just then, a subordinate reported that the enemy mech's signal had not disappeared from the radar. The smile on the commander's face instantly froze as he turned to look at the sky. Once the explosion's light faded, the hit mech stood unharmed in midair. He brushed off the residue from his armor, completely unscathed. Seeing this, the commander was utterly stunned, stammering, "It took a direct hit from a missile and is completely fine? This mech is just too exaggerated. This is simply sci-fi. It's like Iron Man." However, the decision to concentrate all missile fire on the mech proved to be tactically reckless, and punishment soon followed. While the mech attracted all the firepower, the mech army took the opportunity to completely destroy all of the air forces stationed nearby, simultaneously targeting their air defense positions. These air defense weapons, once approached, became like live targets ready to be slaughtered. At this moment, the scythe of destruction was already poised at their throats. The mech army split into several parts, charging toward multiple air defense positions. But upon arrival, they were shocked to find that the area was heavily fortified. It seemed the opposing forces anticipated the mech army's attack on their defenses and had laid an ambush with a large number of troops. Hundreds of thousands of ground forces awaited, launching a frenzied assault against the mechs amidst a hail of gunfire. Even with intelligent AI, the mechs could not evade such a dense barrage. However, the mech's defensive capabilities were extraordinarily strong, rendering them impervious to the enemy's bullets. This terrified the forces, who could only watch as their bullets struck the Mechs without causing any significant damage. What was even more frightening was that the incredibly resilient Alliance soldiers began to unleash havoc among the crowd. They descended like gods of war, cutting down wave after wave of enemy soldiers. It appeared that the forces of the opposing side had surrounded them, but it looked more like they had surrounded hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers instead. Some Mechs even plowed through the enemy positions, sending commanders fleeing in panic. As the soldiers saw their leaders run, they too began to retreat, and the number of those fleeing grew rapidly. Thus, the following scene unfolded. Dozens of Mechs pursued hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The soldiers were so frightened that they dropped their weapons and fled. The Mech army was stunned, their Mechs stained red with blood, appearing particularly glaring in the twilight. At the command center, the commander learned that his soldiers were terrified and fleeing, and he angrily slammed the table, shouting, "How can our ground forces be unable to defeat their air forces? This is unreasonable." His face was filled with anger and frustration. However, when he witnessed the Mechs effortlessly mowing down the soldiers, he completely lost his composure. His eyes filled with fear and despair. What he thought were Air Force Mechs were even more terrifying on the ground, like a scythe reaping defenseless chicks, utterly overpowering the soldiers. The commander was thoroughly shaken. Hundreds of thousands of troops being chased and attacked by just a few Mechs was an absolute disgrace. He couldn't help but think, if it were the forces from another nation, they would charge fearlessly at those Mechs. In his mind, while the military strength of that nation might not be the strongest, their troops were definitely the bravest. Of course, this was just his imagination. After all, those Mechs were produced by that nation. How could they fight against their own? Even if those Mechs did revolt, that nation wouldn't let their people sacrifice themselves. They would simply deploy space Mechs, which would be enough. In front of the space Mechs, these individual combat Mechs were just like chicks. While the commander was immersed in endless despair, on the other side, just as he had anticipated, news came from his subordinates. Report, General. The eastern border. The Desert Coalition has organized a large army and invaded our country. The numbers are nearly 500,000. Our new recruits were utterly overwhelmed by such a massive force, and all fled in fear. Upon hearing this news, the commander surprisingly calmed down. His eyes revealed a kind of tranquility after despair. He ordered his subordinates to leave the room. Everyone was puzzled but complied. However, just as they had not gone far, a gunshot suddenly rang out from inside the room. His subordinates were startled and rushed back, only to find that this man, who was regarded as a pillar of the nation, had died in his seat. His face bore a trace of helplessness and despair, as if in his final moments. He had witnessed the downfall of the nation. The room was filled with an atmosphere of sadness and despair, and the fate of the nation seemed to plunge into a dark abyss along with the commander's death. Chapter 198. Better to avoid trouble than to invite it. The commander sat in his dimly lit office, the weak light illuminating the desk in front of him, where a piece of paper bore glaring words. A nation can be destroyed but cannot lose its lineage. If that's the case, should we surrender? He had once vowed that he could never live to beg the Desert Coalition for surrender, but now, facing the nation's dire situation, he was filled with pain and helplessness. Those words seemed to burn his soul, and with every glance, his despair deepened. Ultimately, in the struggle between dignity and reality, he chose to end his life in an extreme manner. He picked up a pistol, his hand trembling slightly, his gaze filled with determination. With the sound of a gunshot, he collapsed in his seat, his life coming to an end, and the nation seemed to lose its final pillar with his departure. On that day, under the overwhelming force of the powerful Mech army of the Desert Alliance, the nation finally succumbed to the burden and chose to surrender. In just over a day, the Desert Alliance swept through like an unstoppable flood, completely conquering the nation. Standing in front of the capital, a symbol of the nation's center of power, the leader of the Desert Alliance stood tall, his face radiating with the joy of victory, yet also carrying a hint of complexity. He looked around at the high-ranking officials of the Desert Alliance and the relocated citizens, announcing loudly, "The nation has been destroyed." His voice was loud and firm, echoing in the air, as if declaring the end of one era and the beginning of another. He glanced at a figure standing beside him, nodding at the flag of the nation. Understanding the cue, the figure promptly led a few soldiers to swiftly take down the flag that had once flown over the nation. The flag, which had once symbolized the nation's glory, now slowly descended, seemingly taking with it the former splendor and honor. Subsequently, a brand new flag of the Desert Alliance was slowly raised, fluttering in the gentle breeze. From that moment on, this place was no longer a nation, but a region jointly governed by the Desert Alliance. The news spread through television broadcasts across the countries of the Desert Alliance, and cheers erupted from the citizens watching at home. The pests of the region were finally gone. After enduring the turmoil of an energy crisis, this victory undoubtedly brought them immense joy. People celebrated joyfully in the streets, marking this hard-won triumph. Afterward, the Desert Alliance began to seize all the assets of the fallen nation, ostensibly to compensate for the trauma caused by the previous exploitation. However, during this process, the high-ranking officials also gained enormous benefits, seemingly relishing in the act of plunder. As wealth continuously flowed into their pockets, their desires began to swell. Some even suggested continuing to engage in conflicts and further plunder. At this moment, a congratulatory message arrived from another nation. They first congratulated the Desert Alliance on their victory, and then clearly expressed their desire to see peace in the region, hoping that this event would lead to stability. Upon receiving this message, the leader understood that it was a warning to know when to stop. He was well aware of the strength of the other nation and knew they could not act recklessly. Although the Desert Alliance had achieved victory in this war, they understood that it was primarily due to their advanced combat mechs. The other nation, on the other hand, was a major producer of mechs, certainly having a significant number more than they did. Faced with this warning, they had to restrain their thoughts of continued plunder, for they knew that with the other nation's intervention, they could not afford to remain arrogant. In a public channel, a reporter was petitioning on behalf of the citizens. Dear Prince, our citizens feel that the presence of the people from a certain nation on our territory is quite bothersome. They are asking if there are any measures to make their presence less intrusive. Upon hearing this question, the prince responded without hesitation, of course. In fact, we have long formulated a plan to address the presence of these individuals. That is to relocate them to a certain area. The people from that nation were taken aback by this news. The area mentioned had been devastated by war, leaving nothing behind. How would they survive there? However, as the defeated, they had no choice but to accept this fate. Thus, nearly 10 million began a difficult migration, taking their families and a few belongings on an unknown journey to the designated area. At that moment, another region opened its doors and expressed willingness to accept some refugees. A portion of the displaced individuals saw hope and joyfully made their way there. A popular influencer from that nation even live-streamed the experience online, exclaiming, "This place is truly welcoming." Walking down the streets, he wore a strange smile. Suddenly, he seemed to discover something. Excitedly, he turned the camera around. "Family, look." On the screen are a group of vibrant young women from this region. He gulped, his eyes gleaming with excitement, as if he had entered paradise. Look at how beautiful these girls are. No wonder it's known for its charm, with young girls full of vitality and even the older women exuding grace. However, their beautiful dreams were soon shattered. Before long, they were arrested and sent to the front lines. It was then that they realized they had been deceived. They had been treated as expendable resources by the leadership of this region. In a spacious office, the atmosphere was unusually tense. High-ranking officials were gathered around a conference table, their eyes glued to the television broadcasting news of the downfall of that nation, each face reflecting complex emotions. The leader sat at the head of the table, arms crossed over his chest, silent, with a slight furrow in his brow, revealing deep contemplation. Finally, the Secretary of Defense could no longer bear the silence and anxiously asked, "Mr. President, are we really going to do nothing? That nation has fallen. Can we tolerate this? The whole world knows they were our ally. Yet now, their nation has collapsed, and as their leader, we remain silent? This makes it difficult for the others to remain loyal to them." The voice of the defense secretary was clearly filled with dissatisfaction and anxiety. He understood the importance of the key figure in international geopolitical matters, and their downfall could trigger a series of chain reactions, impacting their international status and influence. The president shrugged helplessly, slowly turned to the defense secretary, and countered, "How can we manage this? The alliance seems to be intent on eliminating the key figure, likely realizing that we are the true culprits behind the energy crisis, directing their anger towards them. Moreover, this key figure has been exacerbating the crisis recently, which is why they are so ruthless. This is not our fault. If anyone is to blame, it's their own actions that led to this outcome." The president's tone also revealed a hint of helplessness and anger. He was dissatisfied with the actions of the key figure, but at this moment, it was more important to consider their own interests and situation. Furthermore, the alliance's hatred towards us may have dissipated considerably. If it weren't for this scapegoat, I'm certain their forces would have crossed the ocean to confront us. At this moment, pointing fingers at them might only provoke their anger. Do you think your defense forces can handle those advanced machines? If you can, I can issue a statement right now condemning them. The president's gaze was fixed intently on the defense secretary. His words left the defense secretary in silence. He knew that while their military strength was formidable, they could not be entirely confident against the alliance's advanced machines. He wanted to argue that their military might could potentially match the enemy's machines, but he also understood that even if they could win, it would come at a heavy cost, given that they were also experiencing an energy crisis at home. A conflict with the alliance at this time would inevitably ignite many domestic contradictions, leading to unimaginable consequences. Thinking of this, the defense secretary shook his head helplessly and said softly, "It's better to avoid trouble than to seek it." Chapter 199, Information Leak. The meeting room fell silent again, with everyone contemplating the current situation and response strategies. At this moment, the Secretary of State suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence. "I also support the president's decision. Moreover, based on our investigations, the current situation is quite favorable for us. Now, the other country has essentially run out of access to international energy." Upon hearing this news, a smile finally appeared on the president's face, as if a glimmer of hope had emerged. Not just him, but other senior officials also breathed a sigh of relief. The president nodded slightly and said, "Although we are also facing an energy crisis, we have stockpiled a considerable amount of energy in advance, and with our domestic energy reserves, we can definitely hold out longer than the other country. The ultimate winner of this competition will undoubtedly be us." His words were filled with confidence and determination, as if he could already see the dawn of victory. However, at that moment, the energy secretary suddenly spoke up, his expression calm, but his words made everyone's hearts race again. "According to our investigation, the country in question has indeed stopped importing international energy. However, We also found that the domestic energy prices in this country, after experiencing a brief peak, have returned to previous levels. Overall, there has not been a surge in prices. Upon further investigation, we discovered that this country has released its reserve energy to stabilize current energy prices. The leader was taken aback upon hearing this from the energy director, wide-eyed in disbelief, asking, "What is this country doing? They are releasing their reserves just to stabilize energy prices? Are they not planning for the future? Once their reserves are depleted, it will be their national strength that suffers." The leader was filled with confusion and disbelief, unable to understand why this country would make such a seemingly foolish decision. Some scoffed, stating that this country is indeed foolish to think they can address the energy crisis in this way. Let us see how long they can hold out. But the leader waved his hand, his expression turning serious, stating, "This country is not as foolish as we imagine. We must investigate thoroughly. I want to see what they are really up to." After multiple discussions, the leader realized that this country is definitely not to be underestimated. Every decision they make might be backed by deep considerations. At this moment, he sensed a wave of unease. He decided to delve deeper to uncover the true intentions and strategies behind this country's actions, so that the relevant authorities could respond appropriately. This task naturally fell to the Secretary of State. The Secretary also found it strange. This country shouldn't be so foolish as to use their reserve energy to deal with this crisis. Moreover, their investigation confirmed that this country was indeed impacted by the energy crisis. Could it be that they want to take a gamble with their domestic reserves, hoping they last until the crisis passes? How is that possible? This country's energy structure has long relied on imports, and domestic reserves are far from sufficient. They haven't stockpiled energy like some other nations have. Given their reliance on energy, they would find themselves in a predicament of energy shortage in at most 6 months. However, perhaps due to multiple failed confrontations, the Secretary of State felt a sense of caution. In his view, this country is by no means a simple opponent. Their ability to release reserve energy might not be a gamble. It could be based on some other kind of support. What is this country up to? The Secretary speculated secretly, but couldn't figure out what their support might be. At this point, he could only check with the intelligence agency to see what the situation was. He wanted to know if there was any new intelligence available. However, he didn't hold out much hope. By now, he had significant doubts about the intelligence gathering capabilities of the agency's director. In his opinion, the director would eventually be removed from his position. The technology explosion in a certain country has surprisingly gone unnoticed by relevant agencies. This is a serious dereliction of duty. The recent energy program has consumed a significant number of top agents, so action cannot be taken against the director right now. Otherwise, the department would be in serious trouble. At the very least, they must wait until the department gradually recovers before taking action against their leader. Meanwhile, the director, unaware of the arrival of the Secretary of State, is focused on a stack of photos, deep in thought. At this moment, an assistant reports, "The Secretary of State is here." Under normal circumstances, the director would have been concerned. However, at this moment, he is actually eager to meet the secretary. As the secretary enters the office and casually takes a seat, the director, feeling a bit excited, says, "You arrived just in time, Secretary." The secretary frowns. "What do you mean? Do you have something to discuss?" "Of course." The director replies with a smile, "But before that, I'd like to hear your thoughts on why you came to our department." The secretary crosses his legs, placing his hands on his thighs, casually looking around, and says, "Nothing much, just curious if your department has any updates regarding that country." "Yes, we certainly do. I believe this information is quite important." The secretary is somewhat surprised, not expecting the director to actually have the latest news. From his excited expression, it seems the information might be significant. Though he is curious, he also worries that his expectations might be dashed. As he has been quite disappointed with the director in the past, he decides not to hold any expectations and calmly asks, "What is the news? Please share." The director is slightly taken aback. The secretary's calm demeanor irritates him. One might think their intelligence agency only provides trivial information. He curses inwardly and then hands over the latest intelligence he has gathered. The secretary takes the documents and glances through them casually. The next moment, he freezes, puts his legs down, sits up straight, and begins to carefully examine the intelligence report. As the secretary studies the documents, the director provides additional context. "We also regard this energy program very seriously. After all, the costs are exceptionally high. Therefore, I directly mobilized 1,800 agents who have been secretly cultivated in that country. They are distributed across various locations and levels. In the end, we compiled their intelligence and discovered a secret. They are heavily investing in infrastructure to build a transmission network." The secretary's hands tremble slightly as he looks at the information in his hands. This intelligence is too important for them. It completely alleviates their concerns and doubts. Previously, they were worried that the country might have developed new capabilities to deal with the energy crisis. Now they have confirmation. Indeed, the country has some advantages. However, in their view, this advantage is negligible. Did they really think of addressing the energy crisis by expanding the power transmission network? Are they preparing to return to the days of burning coal from decades ago? It seems that this country has completely resigned itself to this fate. Over the years, this country has managed to upgrade its energy structure, moving away from a reliance on coal power to other energy sources. Finally, the sky has cleared up a bit. Now, they are about to go back down the old path. However, coal power has many drawbacks. low efficiency, environmental pollution, cost issues, depletion of energy reserves, and draining national strength. It can be said that the country is showing early signs of regression. Experts predict that this crisis will cause the country to regress by decades. And that prophecy seems to be coming true. Furthermore, coal is simply insufficient to support the entire industrial framework of the nation. It is foreseeable that the industry will suffer significant losses. Economic regression has become a foregone conclusion. Moreover, once the energy reserves are exhausted, there will be a real shock. And chaos will ensue domestically. These issues cannot be resolved by burning coal. This country is in serious trouble. A satisfied smile appeared on Jack's face. He looked at Smith, finally giving him a nod of approval. You at the agency have finally shown your true value to me. This intelligence is crucial. We need to keep the momentum going. And I want to know the specifics of the power transmission network expansion. Although this will not be enough to help them through this energy crisis, it will give us a rough idea of how long they can hold out. Smith nodded calmly. Shortly after we received this intelligence, I sent someone to dig deeper for related information. I believe we will soon know what is really going on with their power transmission network. Just then, a phone rang within the agency. Smith paused for a moment, then picked up the phone. A smile appeared on his face. All right, I understand. You all did well. After hanging up, Jack immediately asked, is it the latest intelligence? Smith nodded, revealing a mischievous smile. That's right. Our spies have obtained some valuable information. At this moment, Jack could hardly contain his smile. At a busy construction site in that country, the chief engineer in charge of the circuits hurriedly approached Su Chun to report on the work. The sun shone down on the site, with various machinery roaring and workers bustling about in an orderly manner. The chief engineer arrived in front of Su Chun, saluted, and said, Chief Su, the circuit modifications required for the Eternal Day project are in the final stages, and all work is progressing as planned. Currently, the reserve of superconducting cables is sufficient to meet the subsequent needs of the project. Su Chun nodded, but suddenly noticed that the engineer's expression was somewhat unusual. He pondered for 2 seconds and asked, in the final stages, has there been some tricky problem? At this moment, Zhao Gang, the person in charge, said to the engineer, since Chief Su is here, feel free to ask him about any issues. The chief engineer sighed helplessly. It's not really a problem with the project. The construction has been going smoothly. However, due to my inadequate supervision during the process, some issues have arisen. Su Chun nodded slightly, indicating for him to continue. There have been occasional incidents of cables being stolen at the construction site. We have strengthened security measures, but some cables have still gone missing. After some efforts, we managed to recover a portion of the stolen cables, but there are still some unaccounted for. I sent someone to investigate and found that they may have ended up overseas. From the clues we have so far, this appears to be the work of spies from a certain country. A hint of worry appeared on the chief engineer's face. Zhao Gang's expression changed dramatically upon hearing this news. Oldly, why didn't you inform me about such important information? This is state secrecy. It's not good if it falls into foreign hands. Chief Engineer Li felt equally helpless. He was anxious and pacing around. He had been focusing on the project lately, and hadn't had time to pay attention to these matters. Moreover, he was not responsible for confidentiality in this area. But as the chief engineer for the circuit project, he had to take full responsibility. After listening, Su Chun pondered for a moment and then calmly said, there's no need to worry. It's quite difficult to keep such a large project completely confidential, and the project is nearing completion. Even if they manage to obtain the cables, it won't be of much use. Perhaps we can even use this to confuse them, making it hard for them to grasp our true situation. Zhao Gang was taken aback for a moment. Seeing Su Chun so composed, he felt there was little more to say. Although the chief engineer still had some doubts in his heart, he felt slightly reassured seeing Su Chun's calm demeanor. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room of a certain intelligence agency, the lights flickered uncertainly. The stolen cables were carefully placed in front of Smith, with various documents and materials piled on the table. Smith frowned, walking around the cables a few times, trying to discern something from their appearance. However, apart from some markings and patterns on the surface, there was nothing particularly remarkable. He muttered angrily, what on earth is this? What is this country up to? In frustration, Smith tossed the cables to a nearby materials expert, saying, hurry up and analyze this. See if there's anything special about it. The Secretary of State is very concerned about this matter, but coincidentally, he has urgent issues to deal with, so he sent you to take a look. The result was that he couldn't make sense of it either. At that moment, the materials expert took the cables, put on gloves, and began careful testing with instruments. His expression was focused and serious, and beads of sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. Seconds ticked by in the quiet room, with only the faint sounds of the instruments breaking the silence. Suddenly, the materials expert looked at the data displayed on the testing instrument, his eyes widening in shock, and his mouth slightly agape. Is this room temperature superconductivity? His voice trembled with astonishment. Hearing the expert's words, Smith immediately leaned in, asking urgently, room temperature superconductivity? Are you sure? How is that possible? The materials expert took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, and then said, from the current data, it indeed appears to be room temperature superconductivity. The properties of this material are simply astonishing. If this country really applies this superconducting cable on a large scale, it will have a tremendous breakthrough in energy transmission. Upon hearing this, Smith felt as if thunder was rumbling in his head. How was this different from what they had thought before? What was this country up to now? In the laboratory of the materials department at a university, An expert named David was closely observing a cable that potentially contained a significant scientific breakthrough. His eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and caution. After a long while, he slowly raised his head and said to Smith, "This is the first time I've seen a true room temperature superconducting material. Although the test results indicate that it indeed is a room temperature superconductor, I can't guarantee there aren't other flaws or limitations. Just to be safe, I suggest we have my professor come over." Smith looked surprised and curiously asked David, "Who is your professor?" David's face immediately showed respect as he replied, "He is a renowned expert in materials science, a Nobel Prize winner. He is Professor Heiler. Before this material was discovered, he and his team were considered the most likely to create a room temperature superconductor." At this point, David paused, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He wondered how his professor would react upon seeing this material. To determine if it was truly a room temperature superconductor, his professor needed to come and take a look. If he confirmed that it was indeed a room temperature superconductor, then it would be. After hearing this, Smith immediately decided, "Then let us have Professor Heiler come over." Glancing at the time, David showed a hesitant expression. "It's too late. I think he has already gone to bed." Smith, somewhat puzzled, said, "But it's only 9 o'clock in the evening. The nightlife hasn't even started yet. Is he going to rest now?" David quickly explained, "You don't understand. Our professor has a deep yearning for the future development of materials science. In his view, even if he cannot personally research room temperature superconductors, he wants to witness the day they are realized. Therefore, he pays special attention to his health and longevity management, especially regarding rest. He is particularly careful. Generally, at this time, he is resting, and we don't dare to disturb him." Smith was somewhat confused upon hearing this. Thinking to himself, "You say he is dedicated to scientific research, yet he goes to bed early. You say he is not yearning for it, but he wants to compare his lifespan with the progress of technology." However, at this moment, he was eager to know if this material was truly a room temperature superconductor, and he couldn't wait until tomorrow. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly thought of something and said to David, "Since your professor has such a yearning for room temperature superconductors, you should definitely inform him. Isn't this the moment he has been waiting for?" The words suddenly reminded David in front of him, and he adjusted his thick glasses, realizing, "You're right, Mr. Smith." Smith smirked and said helplessly, "I almost got tangled up by you bookworms. Enough chit-chat. Call your teacher right away." David quickly picked up his phone and dialed a number. After a long while, a woman's voice came from the other end, and she recognized immediately that it was David, her husband's student. With a hint of displeasure, she said, "David, you shouldn't be calling at this time. Don't you know your teacher's routine? He has already gone to rest. Do you want to wake up this grumpy lion and let him scold you?" David hurriedly replied, "Mrs. Hillard, I have good news to tell the teacher." Mrs. Hillard responded sternly, "No good news is worth disturbing this man's sleep. Otherwise, you'll find out what bad news really is." David smiled and said, "What if it's a potential room temperature superconductor?" Clearly, Mrs. Hillard was also an intellectual and was quite knowledgeable about room temperature superconductors. In fact, she was well aware of her husband's obsession with them. She immediately asked, "David, are you serious? You can't make such jokes lightly, otherwise, your teacher will charge at you like a raging bull." David replied earnestly, "I've done various tests and confirmed that it is a room temperature superconductor, but I still hope the teacher can verify it. His expertise far surpasses mine." Mrs. Hillard was taken aback and said, "I understand now. I'll inform your teacher right away." She hung up the phone, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety about how to convey this news to her husband. What if the room temperature superconductor is real? Her husband might be so thrilled he'd fly. Finally, after deciding how to say it, she returned to the bedroom to wake her husband. To her surprise, she found Hillard already up and getting dressed. Mrs. Hillard was momentarily stunned. "Dear, when did you wake up?" Hillard, while putting on his shirt, said, "I opened my eyes almost the instant you mentioned room temperature superconductors." Mrs. Hillard then realized that she shouldn't mention room temperature superconductors within 100 meters of her husband while he was sleeping. Otherwise, he would wake up abruptly. Hillard wasn't as grumpy as Mrs. Hillard had described. Seeing him getting dressed, she asked, "What are you going to do?" Hillard replied, "Didn't David tell you that there's been a breakthrough in room temperature superconductors? I hope to go see it." Mrs. Hillard understood that her husband must have heard something. She nodded, kindly helped him put on his coat, and said, "I hope this time when you come back, you can join me for a normal night instead of just preparing to sleep as soon as it's time while I'm comfortable." Heiler quietly smiled, then kissed his wife's cheek before picking up the car keys and heading to David's laboratory. Mrs. Heiler watched her husband's departing figure, although he appeared quite calm. As his wife, she could sense that the excitement in his heart was already hard to contain, like a volcano on the verge of eruption. At that moment, their children came out from the house, rubbing their eyes as they asked, "Dad, why are you up? Where's Mom going?" Mrs. Heiler turned around and smiled, saying, "Look closely. My dears, I am your mother." The children widened their eyes in disbelief, fully awake now, and looked at the car that had already left, exclaiming in shock, "Mom, Dad actually went out when he should be resting. Oh my gosh, today is a special day. It's the second time I've seen Dad leave at this hour instead of resting. The first time was when my sister had a fever at night." Worry filled their faces as they continued, "Mom, nothing bad has happened, right? We're worried about Dad." Mrs. Heiler smiled and reassured them, "It's okay, my children. This is a good thing for your father, a tremendous good thing." Chapter 202, Ridiculous Good Thing. Ridiculous Good Thing. Smith shouted excitedly, "Professor David, You can't define room temperature superconductivity with human progress. You are not just a human. You are also a scientist from our region. If the Dragon Kingdom truly develops room temperature superconductors, it is definitely not a good thing for us. Smith felt deeply troubled by the rapid technological advancements of the Dragon Kingdom, his face filled with anxiety and unease. However, David responded defiantly, I firmly believe that the development of room temperature superconducting materials by the Dragon Kingdom is a good thing for humanity. It can promote human progress and push future development. It allows us to experience and witness more within our limited lifetimes. Clearly, David was also a fervent advocate for technology. In his heart, technology had no boundaries. It was the damned politics that hindered its development. If scientists from all countries could gather together for research, humanity might have already achieved a technological explosion. Space colonization and conquering outer space would no longer be a dream. Just as the two were engaged in a heated debate, a hurried sound of footsteps came from outside. They turned to see that it was Professor Hyler. He was a robust-looking scientist in his 60s. But due to his good care, he looked only about 40. Smith quickly greeted him, wanting to introduce the situation, but was directly ignored by Hyler. Hyler's eager gaze was fixed on David as he asked, where is the room temperature superconducting material you mentioned? It's in the laboratory, Professor, David immediately replied, welcoming him. He held a genuine respect for this renowned teacher. Upon hearing David's response, Hyler quickly changed into a white disposable lab coat and strode towards the table where the small section of cable was placed. Upon seeing the materials in front of him, Hyler furrowed his brow, revealing a hint of inexplicable surprise. It seemed something about it struck him as incredible. However, he did not ask many questions, but instead threw himself wholeheartedly into the testing work. First, he conducted basic physical tests on the materials. He cautiously measured the density of the cable using high-precision instruments, performing multiple measurements to ensure the accuracy of the data. Each data reading was done with exceptional care. His gaze was focused and resolute. After repeated measurements and calculations, the density results showed no issues. Next, he proceeded with thermogravimetric analysis and differential scanning calorimetry. Hyler placed the materials in a specialized thermal analysis instrument, set the program, and carefully observed the curve changes displayed on the instrument screen. As the temperature increased or decreased, the instrument recorded the thermal stability, phase transition temperature, and other thermal properties of the material during the heating or cooling process. He recorded the data while comparing it with previous experimental data and theoretical values. After a prolonged analysis, the results indicated that the thermal properties of the material were also without any problems. Following that was the electrical performance test, a key step in verifying superconducting materials. Hyler connected the complex circuitry and integrated the cable into the testing system, adjusting the current and voltage parameters. His eyes were fixed on the pointers of the ammeter and voltmeter, and as the current gradually increased, his heart raced. When the current reached a certain level, he was astonished to find that the resistance was indeed approaching zero, and the data was remarkably stable. This result made him gasp. He knew this was a significant characteristic of superconducting materials, but such a perfect zero-resistance performance still left him in shock. Then came the magnetic levitation test. Hyler brought a strong magnet close to the cable. A miraculous scene unfolded as the cable seemed to be lifted by a mysterious force, steadily floating in the magnetic field. This indicated that the material had excellent superconducting properties and diamagnetism, further proving it could be a room temperature superconducting material. Hyler excitedly observed this phenomenon, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Finally, he conducted stability and repeatability tests. Hyler tested the cable under various conditions, including changes in temperature and magnetic field strength. He found that regardless of environmental changes, the superconducting performance of the material remained stable, and the results of each test exhibited high repeatability. This outcome gave him a very high evaluation of the material's reliability, far exceeding any superconducting materials known to him at present. Hyler was utterly astonished, holding the test data in his hands, his mouth slightly agape, unable to close it for a long time. Seeing his expression, David eagerly inquired, "This is indeed a room temperature superconducting material, right, teacher?" Hyler held the cable in his palm, feeling as if his hand were trembling. Under the tense gaze of David and Smith, Hyler nodded slowly, indicating that this was indeed the room temperature superconducting material. It was exactly the room temperature superconducting material that my team had struggled to develop but had never made a breakthrough. I thought I would never see it in my lifetime. But now, ha ha ha. God, you have finally opened your eyes. In contrast to Hyler's excitement, Smith was nearly in despair, his eyes flickering, speechless. His mind was filled with shock and helplessness. If even Hyler, a leading figure in materials science, confirmed that this was room temperature superconducting material, it could almost be concluded without a doubt that it was indeed room temperature superconducting material. How could it be that this country had truly developed room temperature superconducting material? What right did they have? I hadn't leaked any blueprints related to room temperature superconducting materials. How did they manage to research it? Wait, what is going on? Am I acting like a spy? But I am the head of intelligence for my country. How could I possibly be a spy? Although I did inadvertently contribute to the technological explosion of that nation, that was because they had the capability. I am definitely not a spy. While Smith was still trying to comfort himself, Hyler had already regained his composure from the surprise. He looked at David and said, "David, you really make me proud. Among my students, I have always believed you are the most talented one. Today, you certainly did not disappoint me. David felt a bit shy at the praise from his teacher. A hint of embarrassment appeared on the face of the man in his 40s. It was known that their teacher was usually serious and rarely praised anyone, especially his own students. Moreover, he had always criticized David for being slow-witted, even saying he was the dumbest among his students. David was somewhat puzzled about why his teacher was praising him out of the blue. Soon, he realized and quickly explained. Teacher, this room temperature superconducting material was not produced by our team. Hyler frowned but then understood, saying, I said you were too slow-witted to have researched room temperature superconducting material. David was clearly used to this way of speaking from his teacher and didn't he take it to heart. Hyler then asked, which team developed it? This is really surprising. David replied, it wasn't a team from our country. It was researched by that nation. Hyler was taken aback, turning to David with wide eyes, exclaiming in surprise, that nation? They could develop room temperature superconductors? Are you joking? Smith explained, this cable was obtained from that nation by our spies. What? This thing is a cable? Hyler was completely stunned. He had thought this looked like a cable initially, but didn't he think much of it. After all, applying room temperature superconducting material before it was even on the market was simply unbelievable to them. It was as if a newborn could already be making soy sauce. At this moment, after hearing Smith's words, Hyler could no longer hold himself together. He realized that that nation not only developed room temperature superconducting technology, but had also quickly realized its application. There were only two possibilities. Either they had developed room temperature superconducting technology a long time ago. Either their applied research and theoretical research have surpassed their own countries, making them truly world-class. Chapter 203. They are now on the brink of collapse. Hillel's praise for the Dragon Country made Smith feel extremely uncomfortable. A sensation that was difficult to accept, like a thorn in his back. However, in the face of the undeniable fact of room temperature superconductivity, he felt unwilling but had no grounds for rebuttal. At this moment, the only thought in his mind was to relay this astonishing news to the Secretary of State and the President as quickly as possible. He also understood that if he could bring Hillel along, it would undoubtedly add credibility and influence to the message. After all, this expert, renowned in the scientific community and a Nobel laureate, had a weight in his words that was far beyond his own. He turned his gaze to Hillel, who was still immersed in the intense shock brought by room temperature superconductivity, murmuring to himself, I must get to know this genius team. They have brought room temperature superconductivity into this world, truly a real-life Prometheus. His eyes were filled with admiration and eager yearning, as if he could already see the mysterious team shining in the halls of science. Seeing this, Smith couldn't help but frown and suddenly spoke up. I advise you to dismiss that thought. Hillel was interrupted by this sudden remark, momentarily stunned. Then his brow furrowed, and an unhappy expression appeared on his face. He replied firmly, Mr. Smith, you have no right to interfere with my freedom. I am an independent individual, and moreover, what I pursue is pure academic exchange, with no political entanglements. Smith sighed helplessly and explained, but you must understand. This cable made of room temperature superconducting material was brought back by our spies through improper means. Think about it. How do you plan to communicate with the Dragon Country? They will likely pretend not to know and even question you on how you obtained their secrets. Upon hearing this, Hillel's expression gradually became complicated. He understood that Smith's words were not without reason. In the current complex situation, attempting to engage in normal academic exchange with the Dragon Country indeed faced many insurmountable obstacles. Anger surged within him as he quietly complained, why can't everyone coexist peacefully and cooperatively? What good does this constant open and covert struggle do for the advancement of science? Smith merely gave a faint sneer and said, without our conflict, you wouldn't even have the chance to see this room temperature superconducting material. Come on, Professor Hillel, let us inform our president about this news. Perhaps under our operation, the opportunity for you to engage in academic exchange with the Dragon Country will come even sooner. Although Hillel still had many grievances in his heart, he understood that the current situation did not allow him to dwell too much on it. He sighed helplessly and reluctantly agreed to go with Smith. At the center of power, the palace, the leader was leisurely listening to the report from the Secretary of State. You mentioned that the country has truly resigned itself and is preparing to return to the days of coal burning? This is indeed fantastic news. So, we just need to quietly wait for the fall of this empire? The leader was extremely excited, wearing a proud smile as if he could already see the country heading towards decline. Immediately, he enthusiastically instructed his subordinates to open a long-preserved bottle of champagne to celebrate. His subordinates were slightly taken aback. This bottle of champagne was quite valuable, and the leader had always treated it as a treasure, reluctant to drink it. Yet now he made an exception for this news. However, just as his subordinates poured 2 glasses for the leader and the Secretary of State, another subordinate suddenly came in to report, Sir, Mr. Smith has arrived. The leader chuckled lightly and teased. He timed his arrival perfectly. Did he catch wind of the champagne? Soon after, Mr. Smith and Professor Hillel entered the room together. After a brief introduction, the leader looked at Hillel with some surprise, wondering why Smith had brought a professor along. The Secretary of State seemed to know the reason and explained to the leader, previously, our spies obtained a cable material from the country, which is precisely the material used for laying the power generation network. I had Mr. Smith find professionals to study that small section of cable. After saying this, he looked at Smith and asked, how is the analysis of that material going? Smith shook his head helplessly and turned his gaze to Hillel, indicating that he should explain. Both the leader and the Secretary of State looked at Hillel with puzzled expressions. Hillel took a deep breath and calmly introduced. After our rigorous analysis, we can confirm without a doubt that this material is a room temperature superconductor. Upon hearing this, the leader and the Secretary of State showed puzzled expressions, clearly unfamiliar with this material. Seeing this, Hillel began to seriously explain the advancements and strengths of room temperature superconductors, as well as the difficulties encountered during the research and development process. He elaborated on the revolutionary changes that room temperature superconductors could bring to energy transmission, electronic devices, and many other fields, as well as the tremendous efforts and challenges faced by the global scientific community to achieve this breakthrough. After listening to Hillel's introduction, both the leader and the Secretary of State were stunned, their eyes wide open in disbelief. The country actually developed such an impressive material? We haven't even developed it yet. And they have already done so? Their technology has outpaced us again. The Secretary of State muttered to himself, his face filled with shock and anxiety. Using this material as wires, wouldn't that save a lot of energy? Hillel nodded slightly and confidently said, absolutely, and not just save a lot of energy, but save an enormous amount of energy. However, under normal circumstances, no one would be foolish enough to use such precious material as wires. The Secretary of State swallowed hard, looking at Smith, seemingly seeking further confirmation. At this moment, Smith also looked confused. He slowly said, according to our intelligence, a certain country is using this material to establish a nationwide power transmission network. They are treating this material like regular wires. What? Hyler was taken aback, his voice rising several decibels. They are actually using such precious materials as wires? Smith helplessly replied, didn't I tell you before? That thing is a cable. Hyler excitedly responded. But that doesn't mean they are laying it out as wires across the country. This indicates that this country has not only manufactured extremely valuable room temperature superconducting materials, but has also achieved large-scale application of these materials. More importantly, they can mass-produce this room temperature superconducting material. In other words, while we are still struggling for technological breakthroughs, room temperature superconducting materials have become as common as cabbage over there. Upon hearing Hyler's words, the senior officials were all stunned, exchanging glances, momentarily at a loss for words. The enormous gap left them feeling shocked and anxious, as if they were staring at an insurmountable technological chasm. This is too exaggerated. This country is defying the odds. The Secretary of State couldn't help but exclaim. If these words hadn't come from an industry titan like Hyler, they would surely have thought it was alarmist rhetoric. However, faced with Hyler's authoritative conclusion, they could only silently accept this harsh reality. The technological advancements of this country had once again surpassed them, and the extent of the lead was beyond imagination. The executives fell silent for nearly a minute, the atmosphere in the room becoming stifling. Just as everyone was immersed in shock and helplessness, a certain individual suddenly laughed. The others looked at him in confusion. He leisurely picked up a glass, took a sip of champagne, and then slowly said, no worries, no worries. After all, this country won't last much longer. No matter how precious or advanced this material is, in the end, it's just a way for them to use one piece of coal as two. It cannot change the fact that they are facing an energy shortage. On the contrary, I am now more convinced that they are doing this precisely because of their energy shortage. That's why they want to change their power transmission methods, to save energy. In other words, it won't be long before this country collapses. They are already on the brink. His laughter echoed in the room. Chapter 204, The Emergence of the Aerospace Supercarrier. At the shipyard, the busy and technologically advanced site was bathed in sunlight, which shone on the huge dock and towering equipment. Glistening with a metallic sheen, Zhao Yong's office was located in a modern building, simple and bright, with various ship design blueprints and project schedules hanging on the walls. At this moment, a flustered person in charge hurried into the office. His footsteps were rapid, and his face bore a look of seriousness and helplessness. He approached Zhao Yong, slightly out of breath, and said, Chief Zhao, we have encountered an extremely tricky problem. The work on the aerospace carrier is now basically complete, with only the final energy system installation remaining. However, we lack the appropriate tools to install the nuclear reactor. Upon hearing the manager's words, Zhao Yong was slightly surprised, sitting up straighter and revealing a thoughtful expression. Are we really at the final step so soon? This means that once the nuclear fusion reactor is installed, the installation work for the aerospace carrier will be finished? The manager nodded heavily, concern deepening on his face as he anxiously explained, yes. But the installation of the nuclear reactor is extremely tricky and not easy to accomplish. If we have to manufacture the installation tools, it will likely take a long time, which would seriously delay the project timeline. I was puzzled. Didn't he, the chief engineer, foresee this? However, Zhao Yong just smiled calmly, his eyes showing confidence and composure. Of course, he anticipated this, so don't worry, I'll make a call to help resolve this issue. Saying that, Zhao Yong picked up the phone on the desk and dialed a number. After a brief response on the other end, he hung up and told the manager, we just need to wait 1 hour, and our tools will arrive. The manager was taken aback, filled with curiosity as he asked, the tools will arrive in 1 hour? He was eager to know what kind of miraculous tools were on their way. As time passed in tense anticipation, less than an hour later, Zhao Yong received a phone call. He immediately stood up and told the manager, our tools have arrived. The manager, filled with curiosity and a bit of doubt, followed Zhao Yong to the designated location. They arrived at an open area surrounded by neatly arranged equipment and materials. But it seemed like there was nothing in front of them. The manager asked, "Not here yet?" Zhao Yong repeated, "It has already arrived." "Where?" The manager looked around. Confused, Zhao Yong grinned. "It should be right in front of us." Almost instantly, several dark figures appeared behind the manager like phantoms. He felt a sudden breeze pass by, then noticed the shadows flash by. Startled, he quickly moved to the side and turned around. To his astonishment, 5 massive space mechs stood before him like steel giants. These mechs shimmered with a silver metallic sheen, their lines smooth and powerful, and their enormous bodies exuded a strong sense of pressure. With various precise components and complex mechanical structures that left one in awe, the manager's eyes widened as he stared at the mechs, asking Zhao Yong in surprise, "What is going on with these mechs?" Zhao Yong smiled and explained, "These are the tools arranged for you by Su Chen. The upcoming reactor installation work can be entrusted to them." Upon hearing this, the manager quickly waved his hands, firmly stating, "No, absolutely not. The reactor installation work requires utmost caution. These metal machines may have top-notch combat capabilities, but installation work is definitely not something they can handle. A little carelessness could lead to an accident with the reactor. The reactor is the most important energy system, and any mishap could potentially cause damage to the reactor itself. Moreover, the installation must be carried out on the spacecraft's body. If any damage occurs to the spacecraft, all our efforts would be in vain." The person in charge is well aware of the importance and dangers of this task, and has considered everything thoroughly. However, Zhao Yong patiently advised, "This was arranged by Su Chen. As the chief engineer, he must trust these machines enough to assign them the most crucial installation work. I think we should believe in Su Chen." At this point, the person in charge realized that this decision came from the chief engineer. In his mind, the chief engineer had always been a godlike figure. Every one of his decisions was made with profound consideration and understanding. Thus, the person in charge's attitude changed immediately. He not only ceased to oppose but eagerly said, "Since it's his decision, I will comply unconditionally. Let's get these machines started quickly." Zhao Yong was amused by the sudden shift in the person's attitude and chuckled, "You really trust Su Chen that much? Just now you were worried sick. And as soon as I mentioned Su Chen, you immediately agreed." The person in charge replied seriously, "In my heart, the chief engineer is a deity in the scientific community. Even if he just lets out a fart, I believe it has research value." Zhao Yong teased, "You really are a talent." However, despite the banter, Zhao Yong still felt curious and concerned about the capabilities of these machines. He turned to the team leader of the machines and asked, "Are you confident in completing the reactor installation?" The team leader confidently answered, "Don't worry, sir. After training by General Su Chen, we have now mastered the installation of nuclear reactors. Just watch us." Zhao Yong nodded slightly and asked, "Does installing a nuclear reactor require high manual dexterity?" The team leader confirmed, "That's right, sir." Zhao Yong pondered for a moment and then said, "Very well." He called over a subordinate and instructed, "Go get me some eggs." The subordinate was momentarily stunned and looked puzzled but obediently went to fetch the eggs. Soon, the subordinate returned with a basket of eggs. Zhao Yong instructed him to distribute the eggs to the machine warriors. The warriors, receiving the eggs, were also a bit confused, unsure of Zhao Yong's intentions. It was evident that in the massive hands of these machine warriors, the eggs seemed as insignificant as sesame seeds. Zhao Yong then said, "Use your fingers and thumbs to pick up the eggs one by one." Upon hearing this request, the person in charge was stunned. He thought to himself that just hearing about this action made him realize how difficult it would be. If it were normal human fingers, it would be relatively easy. But with the machine's powerful fingers, controlling the strength was critical. A slight miscalculation could easily break the eggs, making it incredibly challenging. Especially when it comes to the cooperation between the little finger and the thumb, the difficulty increases significantly. The person in charge knew that Zhao Yong wanted to test the finger dexterity of these warriors, but he felt that this challenge was a bit too harsh. However, when these warriors heard Zhao Yong's words, they did not show any signs of difficulty or hesitation. Without any hesitation, they began to squeeze the eggs as required. Then, an astonishing scene unfolded. The eggs moved back and forth between the massive fingers of the space mechs, dancing as if they were between human fingers. Even more agile than human fingers. One of the warriors even tossed the egg lightly, and amidst the incredulous gazes of everyone, the egg traced an arc in the air before being firmly caught by the warrior's fingers. This scene was nothing short of miraculous. The steel fingers, unlike soft flesh, could not absorb shock. And the fact that the egg did not break under such conditions only indicated that these warriors had reached an incredibly terrifying level of control over their strength. Zhao Yong was very pleased with this. He smiled and applauded, exclaiming, "Normal people might not even have your finger dexterity. Well done, you have passed the test." The squad leader chuckled and said, "Chief, your test is not as strict as Chief Su's training." Zhao Yong was taken aback and curiously asked, "How does that guy usually train you?" The squad leader recalled the training scene and revealed a wry smile, saying, "He has us hold a needle in one hand and thread in the other, and then we sew clothes." Upon hearing this, Zhao Yong was almost stunned. He inwardly sighed, thinking that Su Chen was indeed tough, making the mechs thread needles with such fine threads while their hands were so large. This is simply devilish training. Compared to Su Chen, my test is really nothing. After this test, both the person in charge and Zhao Yong felt completely at ease. At that moment, They believed there was no better installation tool than these mechs. They were confident that under Su Chen's careful training, these space mechs would be able to excellently complete the installation of the nuclear reactor, contributing crucial power to the smooth construction of the space mothership. As they had anticipated, soon the final energy installation work of the space mothership was successfully completed. The space mothership was officially constructed. Chapter 205 Cold fusion is more than just a hypothesis. In the vast and bustling area of the Longhang shipyard, there was an exceptionally eye-catching test site. At this moment, the completed space mothership stood like a steel fortress, quietly towering there, emanating an awe-inspiring aura. Its magnificent exterior glimmered with metallic luster under the sunlight, as if heralding the arrival of a technological revolution. The size of the space mothership was immense. To maximize work efficiency and ensure the smooth progress of subsequent testing, the design team had thoughtfully planned to overlap the test area with the construction site from the very beginning. At this moment, once the aerospace carrier is completed, it can seamlessly transition into the testing phase, much like a warrior ready to step onto the battlefield, requiring no excessive preparation and ready to showcase its strength at any time. All present are filled with excitement as they gaze upon the finished aerospace carrier. The eyes of everyone sparkle with excitement and pride, as if what they see is not just a massive aircraft, but also a brilliant crystallization of future technology. The design of the aerospace carrier is filled with a sense of advanced technology, with smooth lines outlining its unique silhouette, resembling a product from a futuristic world. The various advanced devices and installations equipped on it shimmer with a mysterious glow under the sunlight, captivating onlookers. Its enormous size further delivers an unparalleled sense of shock, as if it could break all constraints, soaring between heaven and earth, exploring the unknown universe, or even conquering it. The researchers involved in the construction of the aerospace carrier are filled with mixed emotions at this moment, reflecting on their experiences. To create this great technological marvel, they have made efforts and sacrifices beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Much like the researchers who dedicated themselves to nuclear weapon development years ago, they bear the mission and responsibility for their country, having to conceal their work and progress from their families for the sake of confidentiality. This has led to numerous issues within their families. Prolonged separations and unspeakable secrets have caused misunderstandings and barriers among family members, leaving them mentally and physically exhausted. However, when they see the aerospace carrier, which embodies their countless efforts and sweat, they feel that all the hardships and exhaustion experienced before are now incredibly worthwhile. It is a sense of fulfillment from the persistent pursuit of their dreams, a pride in contributing to the nation's technological endeavors. The person in charge stands before the aerospace carrier, tears of excitement uncontrollably welling up in his eyes. He gazes at the result of his and his team's day and night efforts, with emotions surging within him like a tumultuous sea. Zhao Yong, looking at the aerospace carrier, is equally deeply impressed. He can't help but exclaim, "This kid Su Chen really has talent. He actually designed something so impressive. If this were exposed to the world, it would surely shock other nations, especially those from the north. They would definitely be left speechless." Ha. I'm actually looking forward to their reaction. Zhao Yong's words are filled with admiration for Su Chen and anticipation for the future impact of the aerospace carrier. However, he also realizes a practical issue, frowning as he says, "This thing is our trump card and shouldn't be exposed easily. But with such a large size, it's hard not to be revealed, right? This is indeed a problem. When Su Chen comes over, I must ask him if he has any solutions." At this moment, the person in charge is already eager to commence testing. He looks at Zhao Yong eagerly and suggests, "Shall we hurry and start the testing? We can't wait any longer." Zhao Yong waved his hand and said, "Who will be in command of our discussion? This is not a trivial matter. We need someone experienced and capable to oversee the entire situation." The person in charge was taken aback. "Isn't it possible for Mr. Zhao himself?" They asked tentatively. "Come on. You have even less qualification than I do," Zhao Yong replied jokingly. The person in charge chuckled. "I knew it." Suddenly, they realized something and slapped their forehead, exclaiming, "Chief Engineer Su. Oh dear, how could I forget? If we're talking about command, it definitely has to be Chief Engineer Su. Let's quickly call him and have him come over." Now that all the work was completed, they were just waiting for him to direct the testing. Zhao Yong nodded and said, "Don't worry, I'll have someone call him right away." Clearly, the person he had in mind to take command was also Su Chen. At the construction site of the Everlasting Day project, as soon as Su Chen appeared, it immediately caused a small stir. A group of experts quickly surrounded him like a tide, their eager expressions making it seem to outsiders that they were racing against time to report important work. In fact, the Everlasting Day project had already entered its final stages, with most of the main work completed, and there were not many tasks left for these experts to handle. They had mostly been in a relatively relaxed state. However, the shift in atmosphere stemmed from a conversation between Mai Jinja and Su Chen a few days prior. Just like usual, the two were engaged in discussion. Perhaps inspired by a sudden thought or a culmination of long-term reflection, Mai Jinja excitedly brought up a certain hypothesis. This hypothesis was not an ordinary one. It revolved around the controversial yet alluring concept of cold nuclear fusion in the scientific community. In traditional nuclear fusion, scientists understood that achieving fusion required extremely high temperatures and pressures. This is because atomic nuclei carry a positive charge and experience a strong Coulomb repulsion. Only under extreme conditions can this repulsion be overcome, allowing nuclei to fuse together and release tremendous energy. However, the introduction of the cold nuclear fusion concept was like a massive stone thrown into the calm lake of the scientific community, creating ripples of excitement. It boldly proposed the possibility of achieving nuclear fusion at relatively low temperatures, far below those required for conventional fusion, and at normal pressure, posing a significant challenge to traditional theories. Looking back to 1989, Fleischmann and Pons claimed to have observed cold nuclear fusion phenomena in their experiments with electrolyzed heavy water. They used palladium electrodes to electrolyze heavy water and were surprised to discover that their experimental setup produced anomalous heat, along with detectable amounts of neutrons and helium-4, which could be byproducts of nuclear fusion. This news struck the scientific community like thunder, instantly capturing the attention of scientists worldwide. However, the subsequent developments were fraught with difficulties, as many research teams attempted to replicate the experiment, but the results varied widely. Some experiments seem to have observed faint anomalous phenomena, as if glimpsing a ray of light in the darkness. Others have found no evidence supporting the concept of cold fusion at all, which has left people deeply confused. To this day, cold fusion has not been widely recognized as a genuine physical phenomenon. The key reason lies in the fact that the scientific community has yet to establish a universally accepted theory that clearly explains how atomic nuclei can overcome the immense Coulomb repulsion to achieve fusion under such mild conditions. When a certain expert mentioned this hypothesis, another individual simply smiled calmly and remarked, "Cold fusion is not just a hypothesis. In fact, we have turned this hypothesis into reality, even earlier than conventional nuclear fusion reaction technologies." This statement hit like a bombshell, leaving the experts stunned. Their eyes widened, faces filled with shock and disbelief, as if they had heard a science fiction story from a distant future. Subsequently, the individual had someone bring over a handwritten document regarding cold fusion and handed it to the experts surrounding him. The expert eagerly took the document, immediately captivated by the dense text and diagrams it contained. Having previously engaged in deep thought and research on cold fusion, the theories in the document struck him with a sense of awe, akin to a torrent of water that never ceases. The theories were both rigorous and innovative, with each viewpoint resembling a brilliant pearl, strung together to form an astonishing necklace of knowledge. The more he read, the more absorbed he became, as if entering a whole new world of science, murmuring to himself, "This is simply incredible." After a long while, he finally returned to reality from the shock brought by the document. He looked up, his eyes shimmering with excitement, and said, "According to this document, it is entirely possible to replicate cold fusion." The other individual replied calmly, "It has already been created. The energy system of the space mech is powered by a small cold fusion reactor." The expert was once again left speechless, hardly believing his ears. Eager to verify what had been said, he requested to visit the energy system of the space mech. When he witnessed the intricate and powerful energy system firsthand and felt the immense energy and advanced technology contained within, he was completely convinced. At that moment, admiration for the other individual welled up within him, flowing continuously like a river. He understood that the achievements made were not just personal glory, but also a leap forward for the technological strength of the entire nation. From that point on, the experts seemed to have opened a door to a new world. They were filled with admiration and curiosity for the individual. Whenever there was an opportunity, they would take advantage of the relatively free time to gather around, inquiring about various professional theories and hypotheses. Whether it is an in-depth discussion on cold fusion or other cutting-edge scientific topics, they hope to gain inspiration and answers from Su Chun. Facing the enthusiastic inquiries of the experts, Su Chun never shows a hint of impatience. He understands that these individuals returned to contribute to their country when it was needed. By answering their questions now, he feels he is giving back something to them on behalf of the nation. Thus, he patiently listens to every question and provides answers in an easy-to-understand manner, clarifying their doubts. At the construction site, passing workers observe this scene with some confusion. They chat among themselves. Look at that group of older men asking a young guy questions. Did they learn nothing? However, how could they understand the inner pursuits and reverence for knowledge that these experts possess? For the experts, Su Chun is not just a young peer, but a mentor leading them to new scientific horizons. His knowledge and insights are like a treasure, drawing them to explore and dig deeper. Just as Su Chun is engaged in lively discussions with the experts, one of his subordinates rushes in to report. "Chief Engineer Su, Director Zhao wants you to visit the Longhang shipyard." Su Chun pauses slightly, seemingly recalling something, and an involuntary smile of significance appears on his lips. He informs the experts that he must leave for an important matter and will discuss academic topics with them later. Mai Jinja quickly nods, saying, "No problem, go ahead." As Su Chun turns to leave, his figure gradually disappears from view, and Mai Jinja feels a surge of emotion. He gazes in the direction Su Chun left, remarking with deep sentiment, "At such a young age, Su Chun has to juggle both the Eternal Day project and the construction of the aerospace carrier. His small shoulders bear the weight of energy and national defense for the nation. Truly remarkable." On his way to the Longhang shipyard, Su Chun deliberately returns to his laboratory. Upon entering, he begins to search busily among various equipment and materials, as if looking for something crucial. After a short while, he finds a box that appears unremarkable, but Su Chun treats it with great care, as if it contains an incredibly precious treasure. He takes the box with him and sets off again towards the Longhang shipyard. At this moment, the atmosphere at the aerospace carrier manufacturing base in Longhang Shipyard is both lively and tense. The researchers are already in place, their eyes filled with anticipation and excitement, eagerly awaiting Su Chen's arrival. Each one understands that today's test is a critical milestone for the development of the aerospace carrier, and Su Chen, as the chief engineer, is the core and hope in their hearts. Sorry to keep you all waiting. Su Chen arrives at the location with a briefcase, wearing a slightly apologetic smile, but his eyes revealed determination and confidence. Zhao Yong saw Su Chen, and his gaze immediately landed on the box in Su Chen's hand. He jokingly said, "Since you're here, why bring anything? That's quite polite." Su Chen rolled his eyes at him and replied, "This is for the test later, not a gift." Zhao laughed heartily, showing no embarrassment at Su Chen's attitude. Instead, his casualness and familiarity made it seem like they shared a special friendship, almost like old friends. Everyone was astonished by the friendly interaction between Su Chen and Zhao Yong. What surprised them even more was that after Su Chen arrived, Zhao Yong unhesitatingly gave up his position. His was the role of the chief commander. Everyone suddenly realized that Su Chen's status in the eyes of the country was far more significant than they had imagined. They secretly thought that anyone who offended Su Chen would likely end up on the country's blacklist. After all, becoming the chief engineer of the aerospace mothership clearly indicated that Su Chen's status and abilities were extraordinary. At that moment, a responsible person beside Su Chen respectfully said, "Let's quickly move into the testing phase, Chief Engineer Su." Su Chen nodded, striding confidently toward the main seat of the aerospace mothership's control room, where he sat down steadily, resembling a general prepared to command a vast army in a critical test. Sitting in the main seat, Su Chen's sharp gaze scanned the various instruments and displays in front of him, and then he began issuing a series of commands. His voice was steady and powerful, with each word clearly conveyed to everyone present. Activate the nuclear fusion reactor energy system. As he gave the command, the operators quickly pressed the buttons, and the reactor began to start up slowly. Instantly, a deep and powerful rumble echoed throughout the interior of the aerospace mothership, as if a sleeping giant had been awakened. Various indicator lights flickered, showing the operational status of the power system. The power system is functioning normally, the operators reported excitedly. Next, Su Chen prepared to activate the anti-gravity system, a crucial step and one of the core technologies of the aerospace mothership. Before that, he opened the box he had brought, drawing everyone's attention. They had been speculating about what mysterious devices or tools might be inside, until Su Chen took out the items. Everyone was stunned. When Su Chen pulled out several pairs of shoes, everyone was bewildered. They exchanged glances, unable to understand why Su Chen had brought shoes. Moreover, he wanted Zhao Yong to wear them. Zhao Yong glanced at the shoes, frowned, and disdainfully said, "Such ugly shoes, I won't wear those. They aren't even as nice as my leather shoes." Upon hearing this, Su Chen burst into laughter and said, "All right then, if you won't wear them, I will." Without hesitation, Su Chen and the responsible person put on the shoes. Then, Su Chen decisively activated the spacecraft's anti-gravity system. As the power of the anti-gravity system gradually increased, the gravity environment inside the spacecraft began to change. Zhao Yong suddenly felt his body become lighter. He looked at Su Chen and, puzzled, said, "Strange. Why do I feel like you all are sinking?" The person in charge smiled and explained, "No, you are the one ascending." Zhao Yong was taken aback and quickly looked around, realizing that he was indeed floating up. This veteran, who had faced countless storms and never backed down on the battlefield, felt a bit panicked at this moment. "Quick, get me down. I haven't lived enough yet. I haven't conquered the universe. I can't just ascend like this," he urged, asking Su Chen to bring him down. However, Su Chen calmly replied, "Don't worry, you're just in a state of weightlessness. It's not like the heavens are making you ascend. There's nothing to be concerned about." Zhao Yong paused for a moment and suddenly understood. So that's it. This is what weightlessness feels like. As the future captain, he thought it wouldn't hurt to get accustomed to this state in advance. However, he was curious why Su Chen and the others seemed unaffected. Su Chen pointed to his shoes and said, "Because we are wearing magnetic shoes, of course, we're fine." Zhao Yong then realized and quickly asked Su Chen to help him put on a pair. Su Chen tossed the shoes to him and said, "Put them on yourself." Zhao Yong retorted, "I wouldn't let anyone else put them on for me." But Su Chen snatched the shoes back jokingly and said, "If the old man doesn't want to wear them, then just float. You brat, give me my shoes back, I want to wear them." Zhao Yong shouted anxiously. The person in charge watched the two playfully bickering and was instantly stunned, especially Su Chen, daring to call the commander of the Southern Naval Forces of the Empire old man, and the fact that Zhao Yong wasn't angry surprised him even more. This scene truly opened his eyes. Soon, Zhao Yong struggled to put on the magnetic shoes, and sure enough, he immediately stood firmly on the spacecraft, no longer feeling weightless. He was somewhat astonished and said, "Don't underestimate these shoes. They're quite effective. We should hire a designer to create a better version. Let us get each member of the spacecraft crew a pair, no, 2 pairs, so they can also handle weightlessness. We can't have them floating all the time." Su Chen nodded in agreement. "Don't worry, these shoes are just for temporary testing. They will definitely be improved later." With the anti-gravity system activated and everyone in a state of weightlessness, it also meant that there were no issues with the application of the anti-gravity system on the spacecraft. Next came the real test, as Su Chen was about to test whether the spacecraft could successfully lift off, which was the most concerning matter for everyone. Just as Su Chun prepared to activate the propulsion system, a researcher suddenly sent an alarm. Report, there is a problem with the data. This news hit everyone like a bomb, instantly gripping their hearts. Su Chun quickly became serious and retrieved relevant data for review. After careful analysis, he found that there were some minor issues with the temperature control facilities. It's okay, the problem is not significant. We just need to carry out some follow-up maintenance. And it won't affect this test. Upon hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The researcher who had raised the alarm felt a bit embarrassed, saying, "It seems I made a mountain out of a molehill and scared everyone. I apologize." Su Chun waved his hand and said sternly, "Don't think that way. This is about being diligent, not overreacting. As it stands, the test will not encounter any problems due to this data, but once we enter space, any issue with the temperature control facilities could be fatal for those aboard the ship." Everyone nodded in agreement with Su Chun's words and gave the researcher a warm round of applause, praising his meticulous attitude. At this moment, Su Chun spoke earnestly. "I know everyone hopes for the test to succeed, but I want to emphasize that discovering problems before the space mothership is officially put into operation is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. We should not fear issues arising during testing. What we should fear is a lack of issues. Potential threats are far deadlier than visible problems." Everyone expressed their agreement, saying, "What Chief Engineer Su said is absolutely right. This is a major matter related to the future development of our space endeavors, and it's certainly one to be smooth sailing. We should take our time. Slow work produces fine results. Compared to other countries, we don't know how far ahead we are, so there is no need to rush. The more critical the moment, the more likely problems may arise. Let us respond actively and not be afraid of difficulties." Zhao Yong patted Su Chun on the shoulder and gave him a thumbs up, saying, "You speak so well. You should consider graduate studies." Su Chun rolled his eyes at him and helplessly replied, "You should spend less time on social media." Zhao Yong was momentarily taken aback, thinking to himself, "Isn't it said that using trends can help connect with young people? Clearly, marketing accounts can't be trusted." Seeing that the data did not show any major issues, Su Chun took a deep breath and began the next step of the test. He scanned the control panel once more and then activated the propulsion device. Instantly, the space mothership emitted a stronger roar, and the entire hull trembled slightly, as if it were gathering strength. Gradually, the space mothership began to start up. Its massive body slowly lifted off the ground, ascending towards the sky. Chapter 208. No need for secrecy, just make it public. The enormous space mothership began to rise slowly amid the tense and expectant gazes of the crowd. Its colossal metallic body gradually detached from the ground, emitting a deep and powerful roar, as if a long-sleeping giant beast was awakening, slowly unfurling its wings in preparation to soar into the heavens. Witnessing this breathtaking scene, the researchers were unable to contain their excitement. Their emotions were ignited in an instant, and the joy within them surged like a flood breaking through a dam. Some researchers even had red eyes, tears welling up, overwhelmed by the excitement and emotion of witnessing the culmination of years of hard work. "It's flying. It's really flying." They cheered, their voices trembling with the release of emotions that had been held back for so long. "It wasn't easy. We had waited 2 to 3 years for this moment," an elderly researcher said with a heartfelt smile, reminiscing about the days of relentless effort over the past few years. The countless experiments, adjustments, and improvements, each step filled with their dedication and hard work. Now, seeing the aerospace mothership truly take off, all their efforts had paid off, and the joy and pride were beyond words. Haha, although 2 to 3 years isn't too long for the aerospace mothership, it's so gratifying to finally see the results. Everyone shared their joy and pride, exchanging words and embracing one another to celebrate this great moment, as if the whole world was cheering for them. The leader, filled with excitement, prepared to have the team open the ceiling of the base, which was specifically designed for the launch of the aerospace mothership. However, unexpectedly, Su Chun indicated that it wasn't necessary. The crowd fell silent, looking at Su Chun in confusion. Su Chun glanced at the current height of the aerospace mothership, about 3 meters, then skillfully operated the control panel to lock the thrusters, precisely maintaining the height at 3 meters. Thus, the aerospace mothership hovered steadily at that height, like a floating castle standing quietly. Those waiting outside for the aerospace mothership to ascend were momentarily taken aback, questioning why it wasn't taking off. Zhao Yong looked puzzled. Staring at Su Chun, with a smile, Su Chun explained, "It's not time to take off yet. We need to keep the aerospace mothership in a state of weightlessness." The leader curiously asked, "What is the purpose of this?" Su Chun patiently replied, "On one hand, we need to wait for the installation of weapons and mechs. On the other, we need to continue testing its stability. You wouldn't want our aerospace mothership to suddenly drop from the sky due to stability issues, right?" Hearing his words, everyone instantly understood. They knew that the development of the aerospace mothership was an extremely complex and rigorous project. Every step had to undergo strict testing and verification. Just like commercial aircraft undergo multiple test flights for stability before entering service, the aerospace mothership required even more caution, as it would be navigating in outer space. And any stability issues could lead to unimaginable consequences. Su Chun led the team down from the aerospace mothership and casually said to Zhao Yong, "Old Zhao, could you bring some good tea?" Zhao Yong, still a bit puzzled, readily sent someone to fetch it. In a short while, his subordinate returned with tea leaves, which turned out to be excellent pure tea that Zhao Yong had treasured for over a decade. Upon opening the package, the rich aroma wafted through the air. Su Chun unabashedly broke off half of it, wrapping it in a tissue and pocketing it. Watching old Zhao's reluctant expression, Su Chun chuckled lightly. Reluctant? Zhao Lao smirked and said, it's only because you can eat and take from me. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to lend my courage to anyone else. Su Chun smiled but remained silent, his gaze once again fixed on the aerospace mothership, filled with anticipation and contemplation. Thus, everyone sat quietly, sipping tea, as time passed unknowingly. They enjoyed the fragrance of the tea while keeping an eye on the situation of the mothership. As time went on, no abnormalities appeared on the mothership, and all data remained stable. Everyone grew excited, knowing this meant the preliminary tests had achieved significant success. Su Chun carefully observed the data, nodding in satisfaction as the performance was quite good and the preliminary results were very satisfactory. He turned to the researchers present and said, everyone, your hard work has not been in vain. Hearing this, the researchers were so excited that they hugged each other again, with cheers rising higher and higher. With the preliminary tests concluded, they now awaited the completion of other equipment, followed by stability testing. Afterwards, Zhao Lao took Su Chun to his office. Upon entering, Zhao Lao's expression turned serious as he said, I've heard that some of our cables related to the Eternal Day project have been stolen. Some of them have even made it abroad. Su Chun smiled slightly. You are quite well informed. Zhao Lao's expression grew more serious as he continued. So, this matter is true. Su Chun nodded calmly and said, indeed, it is true. Zhao Lao found Su Chun's calm demeanor somewhat puzzling. He anxiously said, the Eternal Day project is crucial. If those top scientists gain any information, what are we going to do? Su Chun calmly smiled and reassured him. That's not a problem. They can only obtain the information that we've developed room temperature superconductors through those cables. If they think further, they might believe we are at a loss in the face of the current energy crisis and start considering electric energy. If they think we are preparing to burn coal, that would be even more ridiculous. Zhao Lao frowned, indicating he didn't quite understand, but he chose to trust Su Chun. Since you believe it's not a big issue, then that's fine. At this point, Zhao Lao began to express another reason for calling Su Chun over. He said with concern, nowadays, various technologies are emerging in our country, and there are many spies planted by intelligence agencies here. Our confidentiality work must be solid. The issue of the lost cables, even if the impact isn't significant, serves as a warning, especially with our aerospace mothership. While preliminary tests can be conducted in the base, if we proceed to ultimate testing, it will be exposed outside. In the sky, its size is so massive, how can we ensure confidentiality? Not just me, even those above are troubled by this issue. This is our country's ultimate trump card. Zhao Lao's face was full of worry, and it was evident from his expression that he was genuinely troubled by this matter. He looked at Su Chun eagerly and said, you kid, hurry up and give us some ideas. Can we make the spacecraft invisible to others by using stealth materials? Old Zhao thought of the stealth materials from back then and looked at Su Chun with great anticipation. Su Chun chuckled and replied, stealth is possible, but isn't it unnecessary? Old Zhao was taken aback and asked in confusion, what do you mean by unnecessary? Su Chun, still smiling, slowly said, of course, it's unnecessary to be stealthy. And why keep it a secret? I suggest we make it public. Upon hearing Su Chun's words, Old Zhao jumped up in excitement. His eyes widened, filled with surprise and confusion, as he exclaimed, you little rascal, what nonsense are you talking about? This is our trump card. It can't be made public, no matter what. His voice echoed in the room, and his emotions were extremely intense. After all, the spacecraft held significant strategic importance, and confidentiality was something they had always taken very seriously. However, Su Chun just chuckled lightly, his eyes revealing determination and confidence, and he slowly said, Old Zhao, I want to ask you a question. Do you think we still need a trump card now? Old Zhao paused for a moment and asked, what are you trying to say? Su Chun crossed his legs confidently and said, we have already built the spacecraft. What more do we need a trump card for? Being secretive will only limit our steps to conquer the universe. We should let those nations watch us conquer the universe. Let them know who the real boss is in this world, and let them understand what kind of existence they're trying to bring down. Old Zhao, we should show our cards openly. Su Chun's words came out like a barrage, each one striking heavily on Old Zhao's heart. As he listened, Old Zhao's pupils kept dilating, and waves of shock, excitement, and fervor surged through him. He seemed to see a grand scene, the spacecraft making a stunning debut before the world, with nations shocked, terrified, and then submitting. The passion in his elderly blood surged again, and the heart that once beat fiercely on the battlefield was reignited with new flames. The thought of revealing this trump card and showcasing their powerful technological prowess to the world made him uncontrollably excited. Su Chun was right, the spacecraft had been built. So why act humble? Showing it openly would be no problem. The mission on this planet was over. They were about to truly challenge deep space. Who still wanted to squabble with those minor powers here? Think bigger. Old Zhao thought to himself, and his breathing became rapid. After a long while, he finally managed to regain his composure. Taking a deep breath, he said, you are right. We no longer need to remain dormant. Just thinking about the shocked reactions of those guys makes me uncontrollably excited. Old Zhao still had an excited expression on his face, as if he had already seen the moment when their country would shock the world. Su Chun was curious about the reactions of the people, especially those who idolize foreign cultures. Old Zhao said again, I'm going to communicate with the higher-ups right now. There's no need to hide our capabilities. We should boldly showcase our weapons, and we need to choose an auspicious day for this. Su Chen's eyes sparkled with ideas, constantly pondering the right timing. Suddenly, he had a brilliant thought. With 2 months left until the new year, why not broadcast it live on New Year's Eve during the Spring Festival Gala? The more Su Chen thought about it, the more he felt it was an excellent idea. Upon hearing Su Chen's proposal, Old Zhao excitedly slapped his forehead and exclaimed, "Great idea. They say the Spring Festival Gala lacks good programs nowadays, and now we can arrange a spectacular one. Just think about the effect. It'll be explosive. Imagine, people are staying up late waiting for the gala to end to celebrate the new year, and at the very last moment, the gala suddenly cuts to a live broadcast of the aerospace mothership slowly lifting off. That scene would be breathtaking. Even the mythical beast would come out to send gifts for the live stream." Old Zhao was thrilled as he envisioned the moment, imagining the surprise and pride of the entire nation. With 2 months to go, the Eternal Day project should be completed as well. At that time, it could be presented as part of the Spring Festival Gala program, Su Chen added. Old Zhao was even more excited, believing that this would definitely be the most shocking Spring Festival Gala. It would become a milestone moment in the history of their country. However, knowing the magnitude of this matter, Old Zhao understood he couldn't make the decision alone. He calmed his excitement and immediately called Elder Qin. On the other end of the line, Elder Qin, upon realizing it was Zhao Yong calling, smiled and said, "Just the person I was looking for, Old Zhao. The aerospace mothership starts testing today. How did it go?" Elder Qin and the other leaders were very concerned about the testing of the aerospace mothership, but unfortunately, their country was busy dealing with an energy crisis, and many leaders couldn't spare the time to come and watch. Fortunately, with Su Chun and Zhao Yong in charge, they believed the issues should be manageable. Old Zhao excitedly replied, "The tests are going smoothly. We will continue with stability tests, and once the stability passes, the aerospace mothership can be put into use." Upon hearing this news, Elder Qin couldn't help but get excited, raising his voice a bit. "Wow, that's fantastic news. I knew you guys could be trusted. It means our country's conquest of the universe is just around the corner." Laughter erupted from Elder Qin on the other end of the line. After a while, he regained his composure and asked, "By the way, is there something you wanted to discuss with me?" Old Zhao took a deep breath and then detailed the discussion he had with Su Chun. After listening, Elder Qin was momentarily stunned. He fell silent for a moment before saying in astonishment, "What? You plan to make the aerospace mothership public? And on the day of the Spring Festival Gala? Are you out of your minds?" Old Qin's tone was filled with shock and confusion. He never expected Old Zhao and Su Chun to have such bold ideas. Subsequently, Old Zhao conveyed Su Chen's words to Old Qin verbatim. On the other end of the phone, Old Qin fell silent again, this time for an even longer duration. It seemed he was contemplating the feasibility and impact of this astonishing proposal. After a long while, Old Qin suddenly slammed the table. The fervor of his elder blood surged uncontrollably. "Why don't you go become streamers? This would be such a show." Old Zhao asked anxiously, "Just tell us your thoughts." Old Qin replied loudly, "I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. After holding back for so many years, it's time to show our sword." His voice was filled with determination and resolve. He also realized that the country had become strong enough. It was time to showcase its brilliance to the world. This decision would not just be a simple public announcement, but an important declaration for the country stepping into a new cosmic era. In this era, there would only be 2 players. One is the country itself, and the other is its loyal ally. Meanwhile, other players could not remain idle. They would also step into the new era brought by this country. This era is called the Deterrence Era. Deterrence comes from this country. Chapter 210. Ready to flip the pot after dinner? On the coast of the Western Ocean, a vast and boundless desert area gathered high-ranking officials from the Desert Alliance at this unique location. Morocco, as the nation closest to the Western Ocean in the Middle Eastern region, holds a particularly special geographical position, serving as a key node connecting the Middle East to the other side of the ocean. Traveling from here to the other country is indeed the closest route in terms of geographical distance. This makes the location significantly important in strategic considerations. The high-ranking officials from various countries looked up at the sky with anticipation and tension. Soon, a small black dot gradually appeared in the sky. This dot moved at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, it appeared like lightning above everyone's heads. Upon closer inspection, it was a majestic first-generation mech, gleaming with metallic luster, as if it were a product of future technology. The one controlling this mech was Odd Biao's brother, Odd Fa. Seeing his brother return, Odd Biao hurriedly stepped forward, his eyes filled with urgency, asking, "Brother, what's the situation? Is the energy reserve of the mech enough for us to take down the other country?" At this moment, everyone's gaze was focused on Odd Fa like a spotlight. Each person held their breath, quietly waiting for his response. However, Odd Fa did not speak immediately. Instead, the advanced artificial intelligence system built into the mech answered on his behalf. Only the system emitted a cold and clear electronic voice. After comprehensive processing and analysis of various information by the AI, I regret to inform you that with the current mech, it is nearly impossible to deliver a devastating blow to the leading power in this region. Our energy system is not a perpetual motion machine. Traveling long distances from the Middle East to this region will consume a significant amount of energy. Moreover, the main weapons of this mech also rely on this energy, and the consumption during sustained combat will be enormous. Unless we can deploy 100 mechs to form a powerful combat cluster, I believe we can deliver a heavy blow. Otherwise, based on the current situation, I do not recommend initiating an attack. It is important to emphasize that my response is based on the known information about the leading power, but the actual situation may have many variables. Therefore, the above suggestions are for your reference only. Additionally, I must remind you of a key piece of information. The leading power has the capability and risk of using nuclear weapons, and this mech currently lacks effective means to respond to a nuclear attack. After hearing this detailed response from the mech's AI, everyone fell into a deep silence. The atmosphere was tense, as if the air had solidified. At that moment, someone sighed helplessly and said slowly, "The leading power truly deserves to be the number one in the region. Even such an advanced mech AI does not have a positive outlook on our prospects of attacking them. It seems we have been a bit too arrogant. Easily defeating a smaller nation gave us too much confidence, leading us to become somewhat overconfident. No worries, we can just purchase more mechs. Didn't the mech AI say? 100 mechs could deliver a heavy blow, so we can just buy a few more to reach that number. Right, just buy some more mechs." Everyone chimed in agreement. Since defeating the smaller nation, these countries have made a considerable profit from the war. After experiencing this victory, they have increasingly valued mechs, and deep down, the idea of military expansion has gradually taken root. They aspire to secure a more advantageous position on the international stage with stronger military power. Just then, an unexpected voice broke in. "What kind of useless mech is this? We spent trillions, and it can't even take down the leading power? I thought we were invincible." Everyone turned to look, and it turned out that the speaker was Oddbio, who had always valued mechs. Everyone was stunned, their faces filled with confusion and surprise. What happened to Oddbio today? He was a staunch supporter of mechs before. Why is he suddenly speaking such derogatory words about them now? Is the mech consuming your family's resources? Oddbio's younger brother furrowed his brows, his eyes full of confusion. He couldn't understand what was going on with his older brother. Oddbio, however, did not seem to have any intention of stopping. He continued to speak endlessly. "I think this mech is just SOSO, only capable of bullying small nations like Daishing. It's clearly a coward when facing real strong enemies. No matter how many you buy, it won't help. Look at this AI, it's obviously afraid of nuclear weapons. I thought spending so much money on mechs would make them fearless of nuclear weapons, but they aren't as impressive as I imagined." Then he looked at everyone seriously and said, "You are still thinking about buying this junk? Don't we already have enough mechs? Anyway, we've already conquered Daishing, so letting them bounce around for a while longer doesn't hurt. I believe we have enough mechs. If you want to buy, go ahead. I, as an oil-rich nation, won't get involved." After saying that, he turned and strode away, leaving only his back to the crowd. Watching Oddbio leave, everyone present was stunned, each one frozen in place as if under a spell. After a long while, someone finally spoke as if awakening from a dream. "I think what Prince Oddbio said actually makes some sense. We do have quite a few mechs already. And since we've successfully conquered Daishing, there's no need to rush to deal with that other nation. Let us put the mech purchasing plan on hold for now. I wonder what's up with Prince Oddbio. He wasn't like this before. Maybe he's just had too many expectations and disappointments. It should be fine after a while." After returning, Oddbio noticed that his younger brother Odefa seemed a bit off. Ever since they returned together, the kid had been sulking. And with that expression, one might think Oddbio had spent his pocket money. Oddbio found it amusing and directly asked, "Odefa, you're a prince. Do you think it's appropriate to show a gloomy face to your subjects? Now what is going on with you?" Odefa was taken aback. His expression turned even darker. He had no intention of hiding it, and immediately blurted out, "You know what is going on. You shouldn't speak ill of those mechs. Maybe in your eyes. They're not much, but in my heart, they are my faith. Brother, don't forget, we were able to drive those guys from Daishing to Chesha, and you became the chairman of the Desert Alliance because of these mechs. I really can't understand your criticism." The more Odefa spoke, the more agitated he became, his eyes revealing deep love for the mechs and dissatisfaction with his brother's remarks. Upon hearing this, Oddbio chuckled lightly and said, "Are you done? If you're done, help me contact the Dragon Nation." Odefa was now even more confused. His face filled with doubt as he asked, "What do you need to contact the Dragon Nation for at this time?" Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he quickly waved his hand, anxiously saying, "No way. Are you planning to return those mechs to the Dragon Nation? You absolutely cannot return those mechs." Faced with this suddenly anti-mech brother, the only thing Odefa could think of was that Oddbio was preparing to return the mechs to the Dragon Nation. Moreover, the entity in question might not give you a refund, added the other party. The brother shrugged helplessly and said, "Who said I want to return the mechs?" The first speaker's eye sparkled. "Then why are you contacting them?" The brother smiled slightly, a glint of cleverness in his eyes, and slowly revealed his thoughts. "I'm planning to buy more mechs." Chapter 211. Calm down, bro. You're buying too many. The first speaker was completely stunned, staring blankly at his brother, eyes wide open, mouth slightly agape, as if an egg could fit in. "Bro, when did you start enjoying such contrasts? Didn't you say you weren't buying anymore? You even called these mechs trash. What's going on?" The first speaker was filled with confusion and urgency. The brother smiled faintly, a mysterious expression on his face, and slowly said, "I was just putting on an act to fool those guys. Think about it. Because we have the advantage of more mechs, I was able to become the chairman of the Desert Alliance and a leader among these nations. How could I not understand the importance of mechs? You say mechs are your belief, but isn't it also my belief? However, in this region, we aren't the only ones with wealth. Those others have tasted the benefits that mechs bring and can't stop wanting to buy more. Buying today, tomorrow, and the day after. When will it end? Once our advantage is gone, the situation in this region will become unstable. We love peace just like them and can stabilize the situation, but do you think they will love peace like us? So, I can only use this method to dispel their intentions. The brother's eyes revealed a hint of worry and contemplation. He knew that in this complex geopolitical environment, maintaining their advantage and regional stability was crucial. After hearing this, the first speaker suddenly understood, and a light of realization flashed in his eyes as he said, "So your plan to purchase mechs is also to strengthen our advantage and solidify our mech forces' position in the alliance, right?" The brother nodded, his gaze firm as he replied, "Exactly." A hint of guilt appeared on the first speaker's face as he lowered his head and softly said, "I see now that I misunderstood you, bro. I'm sorry." The brother waved his hand dismissively, indicating it was no big deal. However, he soon flashed a sly smile and said, "If you feel guilty, why not give me your pocket money? We can use it to buy mechs together." The first speaker was taken aback, his eyes widening in surprise as he asked, "Bro, how many mechs are you planning to buy? You're even eyeing my pocket money." The brother stated a figure, and the first speaker was instantly dumbfounded, stuttering, "What? Say that again. Are you crazy? If I remember correctly, one mech costs 300 billion. How much money is needed for that? I see it now. You're not just competing with other countries in the alliance, but trying to match up against them in terms of national strength. Is this acceptable to our king father?" The expression on Odefa's face was one of shock and disbelief. He simply couldn't imagine the enormous expense represented by such a large number. "I agree." Just then, a voice came from outside the room. The two turned to see the king father himself. Odefa was taken aback and quickly said, "Father, do you know what we are discussing? How can you agree?" The king smiled and replied, "Isn't it just buying mechas? Your brother mentioned this idea to me before, and I agree." Odefa looked at the king in disbelief and said, "Do you know how much my brother wants to buy this time?" The king was suddenly at a loss for words. He really didn't know the exact figure, so he asked curiously how much. Odefa repeated the number that Ode Biao had just mentioned, and the king's eyes widened in surprise as he exclaimed, "Goodness, that is too much. You should think this over carefully. Don't forget, we are experiencing an energy crisis, and the national finances are under great pressure." A troubled expression appeared on the king's face. He understood the importance and potential impact of this decision. However, Ode Biao showed no signs of backing down. With a determined expression, he said, "You've seen the powerful role of mechas. Their effectiveness won't be affected by the combat quality of our soldiers, as long as we have enough of them. Our combat power can be significantly enhanced. Plus, right now, with the energy crisis, everyone is financially strained. This is the key moment for us to pull ahead of other allied countries. If we wait until the energy system is restored and everyone has money, I guarantee there will be fierce competition. It will be just like the arms race between major powers in the last century." He continued, "Besides, it's just money, right? Once the energy system is back to normal, we can earn it back." Ode Biao's eyes revealed a sense of determination and confidence. He firmly believed that his judgment was correct and that purchasing mechas was a crucial measure to enhance national strength and regional influence. After hearing this, the king fell into deep thought. He paced back and forth in the room, furrowing his brow as he contemplated the pros and cons of this decision. The room was silent, with only the sound of the king's footsteps echoing. After a long while, the king finally stopped and slowly said, "Then I will take out my allowance too. The three of us combined should have enough." In a certain Air Force base in Longhua, Major General and Commander Lu Qingji was comfortably sitting in his office, happily chatting on the phone with Su Chun. "Su Chun, I have some great news to tell you." Lu Qingji's voice was filled with uncontrollable excitement. "But before I tell you, take a guess." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Lu Qingji thought Su Chun was seriously pondering, so he patiently waited, a hopeful smile on his face. Time passed second by second until nearly a minute of silence had gone by, and then Su Chen's teasing voice came through the phone. "Old Lu, if you don't speak, I'm hanging up." Su Chen smiled and said. Lu Qingji couldn't help but grin and helplessly replied, "You little rascal, I thought you were guessing. All right, I'll just say it. I just got notified from the Armaments Bureau that our space mechs have completed the assembly manufacturing of the aerospace mothership. The 50 space mechs you requested have been produced. In the next couple of days, I'll find a time to deliver these mechs to you." Lu Qingji's words were filled with pride and joy, as this was yet another significant achievement of the military-industrial technology of the nation. Upon hearing this, Su Chen nodded with a smile and said, "That's really good news. The timing is just right. The testing work for the aerospace mothership is also nearing completion." When the aerospace mothership was mentioned, Lu Qingji immediately became interested and couldn't help but ask, "Has the final stability test for the aerospace mothership passed?" It's important to note that, according to normal procedures and confidentiality regulations, Lu Qingji, as a major general, was not qualified to know such highly classified information. However, since he was one of the earliest high-level contacts with Su Chun and had performed excellently during their collaboration, he received special authorization from above and gained some knowledge of Su Chen's project. Of course, this came at a price, as he occasionally had to help coordinate certain matters, but he enjoyed this work nonetheless. The final stability test of the aerospace mothership was one of the most concerning issues for all high-level officials, including Lu Qingji, as it related to the nation's strategic layout and military capabilities in space. Lu Qingji eagerly awaited Su Chen's response. Upon hearing his inquiry, Su Chun revealed a hint of a mysterious smile and calmly said, "Why don't you take a guess?" Lu Qingji responded, Chapter 212 What? The big shot is back? With a smile on his face, Su Chun said, "I won't tease you. After a month of stability testing, the stability of the aerospace mothership is outstanding. The data during this period has been completely normal, and next comes the final wrap-up tests I mentioned earlier." Hearing this news, Lu Qingji was so excited he almost jumped out of his chair, his voice trembling slightly with excitement. "So, our aerospace mothership is likely to put on a great show for the whole world during the Spring Festival Gala." Su Chun was taken aback for a moment. "Surprised? You already knew?" Lu Qingji smiled proudly and said, "Of course, I've heard it from old Zhao. To be honest, what shocked me more is that our higher-ups actually agreed. But we really should show our strength now. Before you came along, about 70% of our country's leadership was conservative. Otherwise, why would they have been so restrained? But after your emergence, our national defense strength has skyrocketed. And guess what? Those conservatives are now more hawkish than us hawks. They are firmly supporting giving the world a good lesson." Lu Qingji became more and more excited as he spoke, his face beaming with pride and enthusiasm. As if he could already envision the aerospace mothership dazzling the world during the Spring Festival Gala. He continued to tease, "I didn't expect the conservatives to be so tough. Even crazier than us hawks. Some guys even suggested sending a space carrier to a certain region to see if there are aliens. If there are, just bring them over. Ask them why they only appear abroad and not in our country. Do they look down on us?" Su Chun couldn't help but laugh at his words and responded, "Well, I'm also curious if there are aliens in this world." Lu Qingji then said, "Since the testing of the space carrier is going so smoothly, you definitely won't be able to join us for the New Year's Eve dinner, right? You'll have to participate in the live broadcast of the Spring Festival Gala since you're a key figure. Your aunt even wants to invite your parents and sister to celebrate the new year together." Su Chun nodded calmly, pondering. Given the situation, it's hard to say. He helplessly shrugged. "I don't even know how to explain to my family. They still don't know what I'm doing." Hearing this, Lu Qingji suddenly laughed and teased. "Your parents probably still think you're just studying diligently, not realizing that you're leading the technology of a nation and even influencing the fate of the world. You're just like a protagonist in a popular novel." Su Chun chuckled and said, "What protagonist? I've read a few of those novels, and they didn't feel that great." They both couldn't help but burst into laughter. After laughing, Lu Qingji said, "By the way, I heard your sister is studying at a university in a certain city. I'm going to give a military lecture there in a while. Shouldn't I give her a heads up so they can be prepared? Otherwise, I'm afraid I might scare them." Su Chun thought for a moment and seriously said, "Maybe it's better not to. I plan to be a person who contributes to the country quietly and anonymously." Su Chun casually mentioned this, but to his surprise, there was silence on the other end. Lu Qingji, sounding very serious, said, "Su Chun, while silent heroes are certainly worthy of respect, I believe they should also appear in the spotlight to receive the flowers and applause from everyone. When the space carrier is revealed to the public, there will be no need to keep your identity as chief engineer a secret. At that time, our country will undoubtedly present itself to the world in a dominating manner, and I don't think any nation will dare to provoke us. No one will be a threat to you." Su Chun smiled calmly. He wasn't particularly concerned about fame and fortune. He had greater ambitions in his heart, and slowly said, "I'm indifferent to such matters." However, I could sense from Lu Qingji's words that he had high hopes for the space carrier, almost treating it as the pinnacle of technology. But in his view, the space carrier is just the beginning. There is still a long way to go to conquer the universe. Lu Qingji also felt he had been a bit verbose, scratching his head with a smile, and said, "One last thing, I had a dream the night before yesterday. I dreamt that we were fishing by the river, and you caught a huge fish weighing 100 pounds. Due to the weight of the fish, you simply had the space mech bring the net down to catch the fish. You asked, does this dream have any meaning?" Without a moment's hesitation, Su Chun replied, "It means abundance every year, good news. It indicates that you are about to experience a financial windfall." Lu Qingji scoffed, saying dismissively, "Oh, come on. What financial windfall do I need? I'm not short on money. Meanwhile, our country is developing space carriers and energy plans. The treasury is a bit tight. Instead of me getting rich, it would be better for our nation to strike it rich." The two ended the conversation with laughter. After hanging up, Lu Qingji leisurely glanced at the calendar on his desk, realizing that the new year was just a month away. He slowly stood up and walked to the window, gazing at the vast sky, his eyes sparkling with anticipation and dreams. An awe-inspiring image involuntarily flashed in his mind. At the sacred moment of midnight on New Year's Day, the space carrier would majestically appear on the horizon like a colossal steel beast, piercing the darkness of the night and shining brilliantly. Moreover, this scene would not only be presented to the people of the nation, but would also be a stunning spectacle for the entire world. Imagining that day's scene, Lu Qingji couldn't help but feel an indescribable excitement rise within him. He seemed to see the astonished expressions of people worldwide and hear the waves of cheers, admiration, and shock. What would the reaction be from the other side? Would they be left speechless in shock, or would jealousy and unease arise? What kind of panic or sycophantic reactions would their allies display? Just thinking about this made Lu Qingji unable to contain his excitement, clenching his fists and exclaiming, "Awesome. This is truly amazing. Just thinking about it feels great." He envisioned the nation shining on the world stage with the space carrier, becoming the center of global attention, with its prestige and status rising to unprecedented heights, even becoming a true leader on this planet. It was time to switch places with the other side. He wondered if that position was comfortable. Just as he was getting lost in these thoughts, a clear phone ring suddenly broke his reverie. He turned back to his desk and saw that the caller ID displayed the headquarters direct line, causing his heart to skip a beat. Upon answering, he heard the calm, yet slightly authoritative voice of Elder Qin. Qin spoke concisely. Xiao Lu, there's a task that needs your attention. The oil-rich nation is interested in purchasing mechs, and you need to negotiate a deal with them. Lu Qingji immediately perked up and responded, Elder Qin, I understand. I'll ensure the task is completed. However, he couldn't help but feel a bit surprised, pondering, wow, it seems they've found the benefits of mechs. Not long ago, they bought dozens of mechs from the Desert Alliance and wiped out a nation, and now they want to purchase more. After hanging up, Lu Qingji smiled broadly, thinking, looks like that little brat Su Chun was right after all. I really am about to get rich. However, this time it is unlikely to make too much profit. On one hand, the oil-producing countries are facing an energy crisis, which has certainly impacted their financial situation. On the other hand, the domestic mech reserves in these countries are already quite substantial in their region, unless they intend to go to war with another power. Buying more mechs wouldn't be very useful. Nonetheless, a small profit is still profit, and they certainly won't complain about that. With this in mind, Lu Qingji immediately instructed his subordinates to arrange the relevant matters for the meeting with the oil-producing country. The next day, the representatives from both sides met formally. In a spacious and bright conference room, simply and elegantly decorated, photos reflecting the friendly cooperation between the two countries adorned the walls. The representative from the oil-producing country, Ode Biao, and Lu Qingji from Long Country sat on opposite sides of the negotiation table, each accompanied by their respective teams of assistants. After exchanging simple and polite greetings, inquiring about each other's recent situations, and engaging in some friendly exchanges, the atmosphere was amicable and harmonious. Once the pleasantries were over, they formally entered the main topic. However, before the official negotiations began, Ode Biao suddenly spoke up, an expression of anticipation on his face, saying, Dear Mr. Lu, we have a small request. I wonder if we could receive some discounts on this purchase? Ode Biao's eyes revealed a mix of caution and expectation. Lu Qingji was indeed taken aback by this request. In previous transactions with the oil-producing country, it was always Long Country that proactively offered some preferential policies to promote cooperation. The oil-producing country, known for its wealth, often didn't pay much attention to such minor discounts. After all, they were rich, and they had always presented themselves as financially powerful in the international market. Yet now, they had taken the initiative to mention discounts. This led Lu Qingji to keenly sense that his earlier suspicions might be correct. The economy of the oil-producing country may indeed have been significantly affected by the energy crisis. At the same time, Lu Qingji understood that the oil-producing country had previously tasted great benefits from using mechs in combat. With the mechs purchased from his country, they had swiftly eliminated their longtime rival. This powerful combat capability kept their demand for mech strong. However, given their economic situation, they likely wouldn't make large-scale purchases this time as they had in the past. After pondering for a moment, Lu Qingji slowly replied, We can offer you a discount, but it won't be too substantial. At most, 500 million Long Country currency per mech. As he stated this figure, Lu Qingji was also weighing the interests of both parties and the market conditions. He believed that this level of discount would reflect Long Country's sincerity without significantly impacting profits. Of course, the ability to offer discounts was a right granted to him by higher authorities and represented Long Country's bottom line. However, it was clear that this was not Long Country's true bottom line. Previously, when negotiating with the Desert Alliance, they had prepared generous discounts. Yet the other party hadn't given Long Country's representatives a chance to propose any discounts. Thus, Long Country quietly earned a substantial profit once again. Lu Qingji was preparing to propose the discount from his side according to the normal bargaining process. If the other party felt the offer was insufficient, they could discuss it further. What Lu Qingji did not expect was that after hearing this figure, the other party immediately showed a satisfied smile and said, No problem. 500 million it is. With a grin, Lu Qingji was stunned. Looking at the smile on the other party's face, he couldn't help but feel a profound sense of emotion. In his impression, the oil-producing countries would have never given such a discount a second glance before. They might even have felt insulted by it. After all, they had once spent money like water, and their concept of money seemed different from that of other nations. Now, a mere 500 million discount made them so satisfied, which further confirmed that the economic situation of the oil-producing country was far from what it used to be. Lu Qingji sighed internally, feeling a tinge of sympathy for the oil-producing country's predicament. However, in the business negotiation, he maintained a professional demeanor, nodded, and said, As long as your country is satisfied with this discount, let's proceed with the formal transaction. May I ask how many mechs your country intends to purchase this time? As he spoke, Lu Qingji took out a prepared contract and retrieved a fine ballpoint pen from his pocket, ready to fill in the relevant information to finalize the impending deal. At this moment, a mysterious smile appeared at the corners of the other party's mouth. He slowly extended his hand and made a gesture for 8. Lu Qingji was taken aback, clearly surprised, and instinctively thought it meant 8 units. He quickly calculated in his mind. One mech costs 300 million, without discounts, so 8 would be 2,400 million. Although this figure was astronomical for an average country, it seemed reasonable for the once affluent oil-producing nation. Indeed, the old saying held true, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even with its economic impact, the purchasing power of the oil-producing country should not be underestimated. Lu Qingji felt a surge of happiness knowing that the country would gain a considerable income this time. Perhaps in a good mood, Lu Qingji jokingly teased the other party, feigning shock and raising his voice. What? Is your country planning to buy 80 units this time? After saying this, Lu Qingji couldn't help but laugh. He thought the other party would understand it was just a joke since the number of 80 mechs was simply too large and exceeded his expectations. In his view, although the oil-producing country had purchasing power, they wouldn't buy such a massive quantity all at once considering various factors. However, to Lu Qingji's astonishment, there was no trace of amusement on the other party's face. Instead, it was filled with sheer surprise. The other party widened his eyes and stared at Lu Qingji, seemingly unable to believe what he had just heard. Lu Qingji was puzzled, wondering why he was so shocked. Then he heard the other party say, "How did you know we wanted to buy 80 units instead of 8? Did you get wind of our plans beforehand? The reputation of our oil-rich nation is well known, and our wealth is a well-established fact. This is why Mr. Lu instinctively thought we were purchasing 80 units, rather than just 8. Originally, Mr. ODBU wanted to surprise Lu Qingji with the quantity of 80 units, as that number is quite formidable and exceedingly rare in international military trade for large-scale procurement. However, it turned out that Lu Qingji's joking remark surprised him instead. Upon hearing Mr. ODBU's words, the Major General from Long Country widened his eyes in shock and disbelief. He tried to control his excitement, but his mind began to race with calculations. How much is 80 multiplied by 30 billion? At first, a figure flashed in his mind, 240 billion. But soon he realized that wasn't right. It was actually 2,400 billion. 2,400 billion. My goodness. Has the oil-rich nation gone mad? Chapter 214. You understand technology. Lu Qingji was truly stunned by the quantity of mechas being purchased by this wealthy nation. 2,400 billion. What an enormous figure. It's important to note that Long Country's entire annual military budget is only about 17 trillion, which is almost equivalent to an entire year's budget plus one additional quarter. Lu Qingji couldn't help but tease himself. Is the oil-rich nation planning to cover Long Country's military budget for the next year? How overly generous. And what about the cost of 80 mechas? A simple calculation shows it's less than 500 million each. This cost doesn't even cover the discounts per unit. Speaking of discounts, Lu Qingji finally understood. It turned out the other party wasn't after the discounts because they didn't have money, but because the quantity was so large that the seemingly insignificant discounts became quite substantial in this massive transaction. This discount saved the oil-rich nation 400 billion. Enough to buy another mecha. Lu Qingji struggled to contain the surging excitement within him and tried to keep his voice calm and steady as he slowly said, "Since it's 80 units, I'll finalize the contract on my side." This seemingly unremarkable statement actually concealed a clever tactic to determine whether the oil-rich nation was joking or serious. After all, the transaction involving 80 mechas was astonishing, and he needed to further confirm the other party's true intentions. Interestingly, it was he who made the joke first. Yet now he found himself caught off guard. Mr. ODBU nodded, still wearing an expression of surprise. He couldn't help but feel a bit more admiration for Lu Qingji. Mr. Lu truly is a general of a great nation, an order exceeding 20 trillion, and he remains so composed. At that moment, Mr. ODBU suddenly thought of something and said, "Mr. Lu, can we convert the discount funds into additional mechas?" Lu Qingji nodded without hesitation, indicating that it was not a problem. Calculating this way, there are still 10 billion left. Lu Qingji said again, "Your country takes such good care of our business that our discounts seem rather insignificant in comparison. If your country is willing, I can apply for the remaining 10 billion and sell you another mech at that price." Upon hearing this, Odabiya was momentarily stunned, filled with great surprise. He wasn't particularly clear about the specifics of several hundred billion, but he knew well the powerful combat effectiveness and strategic value represented by a mech. He even started to worry for Longhua, saying, "In that case, your country probably won't make much profit." Lu Qingji couldn't help but want to laugh inside. Selling a mech for 10 billion, when each costs several hundred thousand, and you're worried we won't profit much? But he maintained a serious demeanor and said, "No problem. There aren't many like you who understand technology. We naturally cherish our cooperation with you. Making a little less isn't a big deal." Suddenly, Lu Qingji seemed to remember something important. Something that Elder Qin had mentioned to him earlier flashed through his mind. He paused for a moment, then said to Odabiya, "We also understand your country's situation. This energy crisis has had a huge impact on you from the root. Given that your country has spent a lot of money purchasing mechs, if your finances are tight, you can use oil to pay for this." Upon hearing this, the confident expression on Odabiya's face was instantly replaced by worry. He sighed helplessly and said, "Actually, we can't extract oil domestically for now." Lu Qingji was somewhat shocked. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Has this energy crisis impacted you so severely that you can't even extract oil?" Odabiya frowned, his face filled with indignation, and said, "It's clear that this plan has been in the works for a long time. The damage done to our oil wells is quite significant, fundamentally destroying our extraction equipment. To be honest, the key technologies and components of that equipment have all been monopolized. Without a year or two, our oil wells will be hard to restore to previous production levels." At this point, Odabiya clenched his teeth, hatred flickering in his eyes, obviously filled with resentment towards the actions taken against them. He slammed his hand on the table and declared, I wish the outcome for them would be the same as that of the cuckoo. Lu Qingji was startled by his words filled with hatred. He tentatively asked with concern. So your country's sudden purchase of so many mechs isn't preparing for war against them, is it? I remember you previously bought 20 mechs. And now you've purchased over 80 more, adding up to around 100 mechs. I'm not underestimating them. Your military strength now is comparable to theirs. Over 100 mechs could approach them, and they might not be able to stop you. Odabiya, upon hearing this, was first taken aback, then couldn't help but burst into laughter. The laughter carried a hint of pride and satisfaction, clearly indicating that Lu Qingji's words had struck a chord with him. He smiled and asked, does Mr. Lu feel the same way? In fact, the reason for Adibio's purchase of so many mechas was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It stemmed from something the Mecha AI had said during a discussion on military strategy. The Mecha AI assessed the current military situation and concluded that only 100 mechas could contend with a certain superpower. To Adibio, the implication was clear. As long as they gathered enough mechas, they could stand on equal footing with that superpower. That superpower had long dominated the global military landscape, towering above others, leaving people with no choice but to look up in awe. Now, the thought that one day their oil-rich nation could match that superpower in military strength made Adibio feel an intense rush of excitement, filling him with extraordinary joy and anticipation. It was this strong motivation that led him to the bold idea of expanding the Mecha army. With Lu Qingji echoing this sentiment, his confidence soared even higher. At this moment, he felt that their oil-rich nation had seemingly become a military power comparable to that superpower. He couldn't help but straighten his back, a proud expression appearing on his face. Adopting the demeanor of a high-ranking official from a military power, he cleared his throat and said, although we despise that superpower, they possess nuclear weapons. We fear provoking them could lead to a global threat of nuclear war. We do not wish to see a global reset, so we have decided to let them be for now. Chapter 215. How many mechas do you have? Global reset. Lu Qingji was slightly taken aback. A flurry of thoughts crossed his mind as he suddenly realized that their nation seemed to have means to respond to a global reset. That is, by establishing habitable zones on other planets in advance. Under Su Chen's leadership, their nation had already developed foundational capabilities in space exploration, successfully entering space and steadily advancing relevant technologies. Only by leaving their home planet could they truly disregard the threat of nuclear weapons. Their nation was not far from genuine transcendence. With this in mind, Lu Qingji smiled calmly and reassured him, there's no need to worry too much about that superpower. We have an old saying, evil will eventually be met with its due retribution. By the way, there's something I would like to discuss with His Highness. Adibio straightened up. What is it? Please, Mr. Lu, go ahead. Lu Qingji said, with the internet being so advanced nowadays. I believe your country should be able to watch our Spring Festival Gala. I can give you a hint. This year's gala will feature some truly spectacular and eye-catching performances. You won't want to miss it. Adibio paused for a moment, though he was not familiar with the Spring Festival Gala. However, Lu Qingji's mysterious demeanor piqued his curiosity. He smiled and asked, it seems this program is quite special. Could you share a bit more about the content? Lu Qingji waved his hand and smiled. That's not possible. I must apologize, Your Highness, but I can't reveal too much. You will watch it on time. Trust me, it definitely won't waste your time. Seeing how secretive Lu Qingji was, unwilling to reveal any information, Odurbio felt even more excited. However, he was also tactful and did not press further, instead smiling and saying, I understand, Mr. Lu, I will definitely watch it on time. At this point, the negotiation entered its final stage, which was the discussion of the delivery time. Odurbio knew that the quantity of this order was quite large, and considering they had already ordered a significant number of mechas before, he felt that the current stock of mechas might not be enough to meet their order. So he said, we are aware that the quantity of mechas ordered this time is a bit much. However, there is no need for you to rush. Take your time. We do not want you to lower the quality of the mechas just to meet the deadline. I would rather wait for a few years. As long as the mechas we receive later have no issues. Lu Qingji was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, don't worry. There will definitely be no such problems. Odurbio smiled calmly and said, that's good. Lu Qingji waved his hand and smiled. No, Your Highness. You may not have understood my point. What I mean is, we don't actually need to manufacture any. In fact, our inventory can fully meet your order. What? As soon as these words came out, it was like a thunderclap out of the blue. Odurbio's eyes widened in shock. He could hardly believe his ears. At that moment, he was stunned, his eyes wide open, mouth slightly agape, with an expression of disbelief on his face. We just purchased 50 mechas from you. Now we are ordering over 80 more. You still have stock? How many mechas does your country actually have? Are you truly in the wholesale mecha business? Odurbio felt that his understanding was being completely overturned. He simply couldn't imagine that the country had such a vast reserve of mechas. In his view, the strength of mechas had become a key standard for measuring a country's power. He believed that the combat capabilities of oil-rich countries and other nations were roughly equivalent to the level of about 100 mechas. However, they had always been uncertain about how many mechas the country possessed, just as the comprehensive strength displayed by the country seemed unfathomable, mysterious, and powerful. Unable to suppress the wave of curiosity surging within him, Odurbio fixed his gaze on Lu Qingji and instinctively asked, may I ask, Mr. Lu, how many mechas does your country currently have in reserve? However, as soon as he said this, he suddenly realized that his question might be inappropriate and immediately added, "If it is a secret, I apologize for my intrusion." He understood that this was indeed confidential, as it directly related to the military strength of a nation. Revealing the specific number would be tantamount to disclosing the country's combat capability threshold. However, his line of thought at that moment was clearly somewhat narrow-minded and limited in perspective. The Dragon Kingdom no longer solely relies on the initial generation of mechas to support its military strength. For the Dragon Kingdom, these mechas have become more like commodities that can generate significant profits in the international market within their strategic framework. Therefore, Ode Biao's words sounded to Lu Qingji like an ordinary customer inquiring about stock levels. Lu Qingji confidently responded, "Don't worry, we can fulfill your orders, even if they multiply several times." His underlying message was actually, if others from the Desert Alliance want to buy, they can come on. However, Ode Biao interpreted these words completely differently. He instantly envisioned an exaggerated scenario, as if Lu Qingji was proclaiming, "I have hundreds of mechas. I'm the strongest in the world. I'm the best. I can crush you along with the others." Ode Biao was completely stunned, his mind blank, and he fell into a state of extreme shock. He originally thought that the oil-producing nations had a chance to catch up with the most powerful entity through this large-scale mecha purchase, and he had even felt a sense of pride and anticipation deep down. However, he now realized that the powerful entity had seemingly become a relic of the past. The current version of the top tier was undoubtedly the Dragon Kingdom. This massive psychological gap was hard for him to accept. He sat there in a daze, his eyes filled with confusion and awe, re-evaluating the strength of the Dragon Kingdom. He recognized that the Dragon Kingdom had silently risen to become a superpower that captured global attention, its true strength far exceeding his imagination. He should have considered this earlier. After all, not long ago, the Dragon Kingdom had dealt a heavy blow to the powerful entity in the White Sea without even deploying mechas. They had long since become the top tier. At this moment, Ode Biao fell into deep contemplation. The future status and development direction of the oil-producing nations in the international landscape needed to be re-examined and planned. The cooperative relationship with the Dragon Kingdom would also become increasingly crucial. In simple terms, Brother Dragon, please lead the way. Chapter 216, Prosperity and Peace. In the office of the finance department, sunlight streamed through the window onto the towering piles of documents. Director Qian Jin sat at his desk, his brow slightly furrowed. As he continuously signed documents with a pen in hand, his expression focused yet somewhat weary. The various national development projects were as numerous as the stars, and the measures to address the energy crisis required substantial financial investment, which made him feel the weight of responsibility. Suddenly, the phone rang. Qian Jin picked it up and said, "Hello, who is this?" "Old Qian, it's Lu Qingji. What are you up to?" came Lu Qingji's cheerful voice from the other end. Qian Jin smiled helplessly and replied, "I'm busy approving funding documents. You have no idea. The national development projects and the various measures to tackle the energy crisis require a lot of funding. If it weren't for the fact that we sold a batch of mechs to an oil-rich country and made over $1 trillion, alleviating our financial issues, I would really be worried. By the way, we have to thank Su Chen for creating such a profitable project for our nation." "So, does that mean the country is not short on funds anymore?" Lu Qingji asked. Qian Jin was slightly taken aback and replied, "I can't say that." Just as he was about to explain in detail, he suddenly felt something was off and asked, "General Lu, is there something you need from me? I don't recall you being so concerned about our country's finances before." Lu Qingji chuckled and said, "You're talking nonsense, old Qian. When we were negotiating with the desert countries, I put in a lot of effort and helped our nation earn quite a bit. Have you forgotten our contributions so quickly?" Qian Jin pretended to be confused, wanting to tease Lu Qingji, and said, "Did we? I don't remember." Lu Qingji laughed and said, all right, trying to tease me, are you? I was going to share some good news with you, but now I think I'll hold off." Qian Jin dismissively said, "Right now, I only care about money. I'm not interested in anything that isn't related to it." Lu Qingji suddenly laughed and said, "Is that so? What a coincidence. It really is related to money. To be honest, as a representative of our nation, I just completed another mech transaction with the oil-rich country." "Oh." Qian Jin's interest was immediately piqued, and his voice rose a few notches. "Is that true? Goodness, those wealthy folks weren't affected by the energy crisis at all? They still have spare cash to buy mechs." Lu Qingji proudly said, "We underestimated these guys. They are still quite affluent domestically." Qian Jin, while signing documents, curiously asked, "Then, how much did General Lu help our treasury earn this time?" Lu Qingji chuckled and teased, not really keen on sharing that. Qian Jin huffed lightly. "All right, now it's your turn to tease me, huh? Whether you say it or not, based on the current situation of the oil-rich country, they definitely can't buy too many mechs. Besides, do you think I'm just sitting here? All earnings have to go through me, so I'll find out the exact amount sooner or later." Lu Qingji chuckled again. "Well then, just wait. We just signed the agreement, and it will take at least 3 or 4 days for the money to reach our treasury. Anyway, you're not in a hurry. However, I can give you a hint. This time, it's a lot of money, more than you can imagine." Qian Jin was momentarily stunned. The pen he was using hovered in the air, and after a few seconds, he sneered, "I know you're just teasing me. I don't believe it. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Lu Qingji grinned and said, "Believe it or not, I'm hanging up." Saying this, Lu Qingji was about to end the call. However, at that moment, Qian Jin put down his pen and hurriedly spoke up. "Wait a minute. Sigh. Alright, you've defeated me. You know I'm an impatient person. So tell me, how much did we earn this time? Lu Qingji wore a playful smile, secretly pleased as he easily grasped Qianjin's temperament. He said this time, you must treat me to a drink, and it has to be from your prize collection. Don't say it's all about my service to the country. You have to agree first, and then I'll tell you. Qianjin, being impatient, quickly replied, got it. Just tell me how much we earned this time. However, he added a warning. But if it's just a few billion and you're trying to trick me, not only will there be no drinks, but I'll also come over to your place for a free drink. Lu Qingji chuckled. Well, you want to have that chance. I sold 82 mechas to a certain oil-rich nation, and after some discounts, we earned 24 trillion. At this, Qianjin's hand holding the phone trembled. His expression in shock. What? 24 trillion? The number rang like thunder in his mind, leaving an indelible mark of astonishment. His face was filled with disbelief, and his mouth slightly agape. He struggled to find his voice. After a long pause, he finally managed to stammer. Old Lu, are you serious? You can't joke about such serious matters. Did we really earn 24 trillion? Do you know what that means? Lu Qingji calmly smiled and replied, of course I know. Our annual military budget is less than 20 trillion. This time, that oil-rich nation really did a big business with us. Still in a daze, Qianjin felt Lu Qingji was serious after hearing his words. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed down the quiet corridor, clear and urgent. A subordinate knocked and entered, holding a document, his face beaming with excitement as he shouted, big revenue incoming. Big revenue incoming. Director, we just received an influx of 24 trillion. Take a look. Qianjin took the receipt. His eyes widened instantly, stunned by the numbers. It was indeed 24 trillion, not a single digit off. Suddenly, he realized and asked Lu Qingji on the phone, didn't you say it would take a few days to clear? Lu Qingji grinned and said proudly, huh? I was just teasing you. Don't forget about my fine wine. Goodbye. With that, he hung up the phone, leaving no chance for Qianjin to retort. Realizing he had been played, Qianjin didn't feel upset. Rather, the joy brought by the enormous receipt overshadowed any annoyance. The 24 trillion transaction became increasingly delightful. With this money, the country would have ample resources to tackle the energy crisis. Various development projects could also progress more smoothly. The lives of the people would be better protected due to this massive income. He thought to himself, with this, the energy crisis is no longer a problem. The nation will prosper, and we can celebrate a good year. Chapter 217. Changing Faces. Ode Biao concluded his trip in a certain nation and embarked on his journey back to his homeland. On the plane, his emotions were quite complex. On one hand, he believed he had discovered the true strength of a certain nation. It was possible that they had stockpiled hundreds of mechs. And every time he thought of this possibility, he couldn't help but feel panic, even suffocation. On the other hand, there was the sudden message from his brother. Family in danger, return quickly. The text was short, yet it filled him with confusion and unease. He anxiously inquired about what had happened, but the message seemed to have vanished into thin air, with no response from his brother. This plunged him into deep confusion, with various possible scenarios flooding his mind, yet he felt utterly lost. However, thinking about the mechs that had accompanied him on the return trip brought him some reassurance. Those were powerful forces sent back with 10 dedicated aircraft from that nation. He was well aware of the might of these mechs. In his view, all potential dangers should be insignificant in the face of such a colossal mech army. Yet, when he thought of the astonishing number of mechs stored by that nation, which was several times greater than his own, his previously stirred emotions gradually settled into silence. After a long flight, the plane finally landed slowly. With mixed feelings, he stepped off the aircraft and saw a group of people approaching from afar. He thought to himself, how could there be so many people here to greet him? A small sense of pride swelled within him. However, as the group drew closer and he recognized their faces, the smile on his face froze instantly, replaced by surprise and wariness. These people were none other than the high-ranking officials from a certain alliance. He was taken aback, wondering how they ended up here. As they approached him, he instinctively maintained his composure and greeted them casually. Yet, he keenly sensed a hint of hostility in their expressions. The oppressive atmosphere made him feel that things were not as simple as they seemed. Oh, isn't this our prince? You've returned? The high-ranking official from a neighboring nation broke the silence first, looking at him with apparent dissatisfaction. He feigned calmness, asking, did you all come to pick me up for something specific? This isn't the place for discussions. Let us head to our conference room. As he prepared to lead them away from the airport, the official spoke up again, this time with a noticeably unfriendly tone. Stop pretending, Odibio. We've been considering you our alliance's leader, only to find out you are this kind of person, one face in public, another behind closed doors. You talk about how mechs are terrible and strongly advise us against buying them. Yet secretly, you went and purchased mechs from that nation. Your actions are simply undermining our alliance. Another high-ranking official chimed in. I've been wondering why you suddenly seem to dislike mechs so much. Turns out, it was all just for show. You are quite a cunning person, Your Highness. Although the senior officials from other countries remained silent, their piercing gazes seemed like daggers, directed sharply at him. Clearly, they were extremely angry about his actions. Upon hearing these accusations, he was taken aback and silently lamented. How did this get exposed? This was supposed to be our secret. He instinctively glanced at his younger brother, hoping to find some answers. However, his brother merely shrugged, displaying an innocent expression, as if to say he had no idea what was going on. At that moment, a senior official from a neighboring country spoke up again. Don't think that the prince told us. It's your foolishness for not properly informing your allies. Just after you placed an order for mechs, we received a call from them, asking if we wanted to purchase some as well. The official then sneered. His gaze fixed on him, eager to see how he would defend himself next. At this point, he was stunned. He never expected the issue to stem from the neighboring country. He felt deep regret for not advising them to keep the mech purchase strictly confidential. However, with the situation at hand, he realized that there was no point in pretending any longer. Suddenly, a series of rumbling sounds echoed from the sky. Everyone looked up to see 10 transport planes appearing on the horizon. These were the advanced transport aircraft from the neighboring country. They slowly descended onto the airstrip amidst the crowd's astonished gazes. Clearly, they had no idea what these planes were for. Soon, they would find out. As the doors of the 10 aircraft opened, 82 mechs marched out with heavy, powerful strides. These mechs were incredibly advanced, resembling something out of a sci-fi film. Their metallic exteriors gleaming under the sunlight, arranged neatly on the airstrip, exuding an imposing presence, like an indestructible steel army. The senior officials present were taken aback by this shocking scene, their faces filled with astonishment, confusion, and fear. Some widened their eyes, mouths slightly agape, seemingly unable to believe what they were witnessing. Others instinctively took a few steps back, as if the mechs were a fearsome beast. At this point, he completely abandoned his facade, straightened his back, and pointed at the mechs behind him, declaring, "Yes, as you can see, I did deceive you. I did indeed go to purchase mechs, but there was a reason. The most important reason is that I was worried about your expenses. In this current energy crisis, how much money do you really have left? Therefore, the responsibility of arming the alliance with mechs will be taken on by us oil-producing nations." If this had been said previously, it would have undoubtedly sounded like an excuse to everyone. The senior officials present were not foolish. They understood the stakes involved. However, at this moment, in the face of the powerful momentum of the 82 mechas, after exchanging glances, their attitudes underwent a complete turnaround. Soon, someone began to speak. "So that's how it is. We misunderstood His Highness. He was worried about us spending money. So he bought mechas himself to enhance the combat power of our alliance. His Highness is truly benevolent. Having such a leader is indeed our fortune. Long live His Highness." Chapter 218. Terrifying speculations. The high-ranking officials of the Desert Alliance countries demonstrated to His Highness what it means to change one's face. It's crucial to adapt. Currently, the number of mechas in the oil-rich nation has already exceeded 100, which is a rather terrifying figure. The combined number of mechas from other countries does not even reach half of that, creating a significant, intense disparity in the situation. According to assessments made by the Mecha AI, the military strength of the oil-rich nation is now comparable to that of a strong power. This is a significant transformation, indicating that the oil-rich nation has made a qualitative leap in military strength. Moreover, His Highness claimed that the purchase of mechas was for the sake of the alliance, clearly giving other countries a way out. In this context, the high-ranking officials of other countries are well aware that if they do not seize the opportunity to back down, they truly do not know what consequences they might face. It is important to note that His Highness has never been a purely benevolent individual. The bold suggestion to annihilate nations was initially proposed by him. With these powerful mechas, His Highness's position in the alliance is undoubtedly becoming more solid. At this moment, who would dare to oppose him? The consequences would be unimaginable. At the very least, they could be isolated by the alliance, losing their voice and various benefits within it. In the worst case, the tragic fate of those who opposed him might very well repeat itself. His Highness is relatively simple-minded and does not quite understand why these people change their attitude so quickly. In his view, his brother is impressive and powerful. He sees those who once aggressively criticized his brother suddenly turning to flattery, feeling nothing but pride for his brother without delving into the complex power dynamics and interests at play behind the scenes. At this moment, someone in the crowd excitedly said, "Now, if we add up all our mechas, we have more than 150. According to the Mecha AI assessments, we may have already surpassed them. Does that mean we are the most powerful alliance in the world?" His words were filled with excitement, as if he could already see the Desert Alliance dominating the world. "That's right. I didn't expect that we have become so powerful without realizing it." Another person echoed, his face beaming with joy. They were immersed in the fantasy of their alliance's strength, seemingly forgetting the earlier unpleasantness and tense atmosphere. At this moment, the high-ranking officials of a certain country looked at the imposing lineup of mechs behind them, and suddenly felt a stir in their hearts. One of them, puzzled, asked, "Prince Odbao, did you bring these mechs back directly?" His tone carried a hint of concern and confusion. The others frowned at this, some murmuring, "Is there a problem with that?" To them, having mechs at hand was undoubtedly a good thing. Why would the officials of this country have such doubts? General Mueller of the country wore a grave expression and slowly began to explain. Buying these mechs outright is a completely different concept from signing an order and waiting for them to be manufactured. This implies that the mech reserves of the Dragon country far exceed our imagination. His words struck like a heavy bomb, causing a stir among the crowd. One official raised an objection, saying, "It's also possible that our Prince Odbao bought all the mechs from the Dragon country." Instantly, everyone's gaze turned to Odbao, filled with confusion and expectation, hoping for a reasonable explanation. The frustration that Odbao had finally managed to suppress was once again stirred up by them. He shook his head helplessly and said with a wry smile, "We may indeed have become stronger than others, But you should ask the Dragon Country if they agree with the title of being the strongest in the world. His words revealed a hint of helplessness and respect. Everyone furrowed their brows, their faces displaying expressions of confusion. Someone remarked, with so many mechs in our alliance, even if the Dragon Country holds the core manufacturing methods, such advanced mechs shouldn't have a high output. In their understanding, advanced military equipment usually had a high production difficulty and should be limited in quantity. But Odbao sneered. You underestimate the Dragon Country too much. Their mech reserves far exceed our imagination. I personally asked Mr. Liu, the representative from the Dragon Country with whom I was trading.